It begins in 1861. I have just inherited the throne of the Netherlands. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 376 North American Conspiracy. 1868, late at night. In a grocery store in an alley in Washington, North America, three young and middle-aged men were gathered together, talking in low voices with gloomy faces. The slightly older middle-aged man among the three asked, "John Wilkes Booth, how is the situation?" "Don't worry, everything is going very smoothly and as planned. The Prussians and Irish have become the targets of people's vigilance. Now even without our guidance, I'm afraid they will spontaneously protest." John Wilkes Booth replied with a smile. "Don't be careless. The more critical the moment, the more careful you need to be. Many accidents in the world often happen at this time." John Wilkes Booth's anger didn't attract the attention of others. The older man asked with concern, "Don't worry, Eric. My current identity is a patriotic small businessman from Berlin, the Kingdom of Prussia. Any action I take now will be consistent with what we need to do." On the surface, the Dutch blocked the actions of Prussia and Ireland in the Parliament, which made President Lincoln, who was of Irish descent, prepare to fire Secretary of State Seward. This news has been widely circulated in Europe and the United States. As a patriotic businessman who loves Prussia, in this case, it is normal for me to hate the Dutch, and it is also right for me to be hostile to the Irish. I couldn't help but feel patriotic in my heart. In indignation, I drew my gun and shot Lincoln. It was logical and would not attract other people's attention. John Wilkes Booth explained. It seems that it is normal for him to draw a gun and shoot at a person, even if the other party is the president. For the sake of profit, capitalists advocate attacking other countries to obtain a large number of arms orders, and it is not a big deal for a Prussian youth who is blinded by the patriotic heat to retaliate against anti-Prussians. That's good. Don't worry. Since we have entered our industry, the most important thing is to keep the secret and protect ourselves as much as possible. After completing the task at hand, we need to retreat safely. Remember not to be greedy for merit and rush?" The older middle-aged man asked another man next to John Wilkes Booth, "Powell, how far have you progressed in your mission?" "The plan is fine, but due to the gap in identity, I have been trying to get close to Seward's neighbor recently, but it has not been very smooth. However, as a retired federal soldier, his family is not very suspicious of me. Recently, Seward has been going to the new hotel frequently. When it is exposed in the future, my parents are from Texas, the Confederate States of America, and my father is of Irish descent. No one will speculate about the motives in terms of identity. Don't worry now, you can go deeper slowly. The internal struggles in the United States of America are getting more and more intense, and some are beyond their imagination. Now is the best time for us to lurk. Now we just need to wait for Amsterdam's instructions. I say, Mr. Frank, if we really kill two people this time, will the United States of America collapse? You know, the European powers have been eyeing this place for a long time. That's not something we should worry about. Naturally there are people above us who will take care of it." In London, Buckingham Palace, after the British royal family held a reception banquet, as people expected, Queen Victoria held a face-to-face meeting with William IV. The meeting took place in the Queen's reception room in Buckingham Palace. The people accompanying William IV on the Dutch side were Foreign Minister Huspert van and Dutch International Intelligence Director Mike Shawn. On the British side, Queen Victoria was accompanied by Foreign Secretary Russell and Prime Minister Disraeli. Originally, Britain should have sent someone to the same position, but because Russell was from the opposition party, Disraeli finally decided to do it himself. The reason why Disraeli insisted on coming was that it was the first time for both of them to meet. Knowing more about William IV would allow Disraeli to make his own decisions accordingly in the future, instead of listening to the advice and reference materials from his staff as he does now. Just now in Parliament, His Majesty William IV's performance was very exciting. As soon as the few people sat down, Queen Victoria smiled and opened the topic. William IV was relieved that the 49-year-old Queen of England could not hear any sarcasm. He also praised her ability to conceal her emotions. He secretly praised her for being a king who had ruled England for nearly 30 years. This determination was not something that ordinary people could compare to. No, I can only say that the British parliamentarians are as cute as the Dutch parliamentarians. What does that mean? Cute? Russell was slightly stunned, and then said with a smile, if that's the case, why don't Britain and the Netherlands become one country? After all, they are so similar. In terms of governance, it can save a lot of personnel and financial expenditures. William IV was stunned. Seeing Ross's narrowed eyes, he thought to himself, it's true that he can be in the political arena of the British Empire for decades. He is really cunning. The parliamentarians are somewhat similar, but the people are somewhat different, William IV said hurriedly. Obviously, he chose to take a step back. However, before Russell spoke, Disraeli followed up and said, I don't agree with what His Majesty William said. Don't forget that the Kingdom of Prussia is now annexing the German Confederation and has already merged with most of it. If it continues like this, it won't take long to digest it. You know, there are nearly 30 members of the German Confederation like Prussia. Prussia can make the people a group. Britain and the Netherlands were ruled by the same king in the 18th century. With such a fate, what should the Netherlands and Britain worry about merging? William IV showed hesitation on his face. Disraeli was delighted to see this and immediately followed up. During the just concluded French Empire World Expo, Britain and the Netherlands had the same views on science and technology. They both believed that science and technology would make the country prosperous. On the contrary, the host country France believed that agriculture should be the protagonist. Obviously, the people of Britain and the Netherlands have a better foundation for integration, and in terms of culture, there are many interactions between the people of the two countries. For example, when reporting on each other, newspapers in the two countries almost always treat each other positively, instead of using smearing editions like some countries do. British novels are very popular in the Netherlands, and the works of Dutch painters are very popular in the UK, especially Vincent van Gogh, a rising star in the Dutch painting world, who has captured the love of countless London nobles and ladies. Queen Victoria also said at this time, Van Gogh's paintings are full of natural compassion and suffering awareness, which makes people feel involved. Vincent is still young and can't bear such praise from you, but when it comes to the sense of involvement, I prefer French painters. You know, the French painting world is the center of the world painting world. It is a holy place for many people who study painting in the Netherlands. Of course, Britain is also a place that Dutch writers yearn for. William IV laughed and said modestly, however, Britain's prosperity is what the world yearns for. The Netherlands is currently catching up, but we believe that one day we will reach the other side. Euphemistically refuse. But it was also expected by everyone. Chapter 377, inviting the UK to become an observer country? British Empire, Buckingham Palace. The conversation between the teams of William IV of the Netherlands and Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom continued. This time I came to the United Kingdom of Great Britain to meet with my British counterparts, to lay a foundation of trust between the two countries, and to carry out some constructive cooperation with the British Empire. Under the current situation, there are some not so harmonious and pleasant voices in the relations between the Netherlands and Britain, the Netherlands and Prussia, the Netherlands and France, the Netherlands and Russia, the UK and France, the UK and Russia, the UK and Prussia, etc. There are many interactions between the people of the Netherlands and Britain, such as the common hobbies of the Dutch and British people mentioned by several people just now, which proves that the two countries have many similarities. Dutch Foreign Minister Husbert van said, I think the stories of mutual trust, mutual support and mutual achievement between them are very rare and precious warm currents and positive energy in the UK-Dutch relations. I especially hope that in the future, there will be more stories like this that will bring the two countries closer, warm people's hearts and promote exchanges between the people of the two countries, and can be reported and spread by newspapers and media in the two countries. By pointing out the commonalities between the Netherlands and Britain and highlighting the differences between Britain, the Netherlands, and other countries such as France, Russia, and Prussia, the chief Dutch diplomat deliberately tried to bring the two countries closer. Although this was somewhat contrived, Queen Victoria, Prime Minister Disraeli, and Foreign Secretary Russell had to admit that this gave them a way out in their subsequent conversations. Although everyone knew that this meeting was a step towards easing Anglo-Dutch relations and taking a further step towards restructuring the relationship, the moment Queen Victoria invited William IV to visit Britain and William IV accepted the invitation, the relationship had already become a natural outcome. However, since Britain pushed Belgium to become an independent country, The tension between Britain and the Netherlands has eliminated the possibility of an alliance, so the invitation and being invited by the King of Britain and the Netherlands has attracted the attention of the whole world. One of the most powerful countries in the world, a newly promoted first-class power recognized by many world leaders. Although the country is only a second-rate country, it is stronger in Africa and the Far East than in the country. Even due to the potential created by the depth, the Netherlands is stronger overseas than in the country. With 1 + 1 greater than 2, the Netherlands has created an influence that is not weaker than that of a first-class power, and even stronger than Prussia's overseas influence. Therefore, the meeting between William IV and Queen Victoria, various countries speculated that it might have a far-reaching impact on the pattern of Europe and even the world, and bring earth-shaking changes to the pattern of Europe and even Asia, Africa, Latin America and North America. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals, the Dutch foreign minister has stood up, and the British foreign minister Russell will naturally not rely on his seniority. Although Russell's qualifications are there, Europe has never been a position that only talks about qualifications, and practical interests are the focus. Your Excellency's words are not bad, but as the most powerful country in the world, the strengthening of the relationship between the British Empire and the Netherlands is just icing on the cake. Although it is necessary to reset our relationship with the Netherlands, it seems that the Netherlands is more urgent than us at present. Hespert van showed a gentlemanly smile on his face. Although that is true, Sir Russell seems to have forgotten one thing. Diplomacy, to put it bluntly, is just a skill of communication and interaction. It changes rapidly. Today's hostility can actually be improved tomorrow. It depends on how to divide the interests. How to divide it is appropriate. Although Hespert van's words were rude and easy to understand, everyone present, including Queen Victoria, was not a newcomer to the political arena, and they would feel uncomfortable. On the contrary, such a conversation is easier to reach a result. Seeing this, Disraeli already understood that the easing of relations between Britain and the Netherlands was inevitable. He knew in his heart that the anti-Dutch feelings of Crown Prince Edward seemed to be suppressed only temporarily. After all, the Queen's attitude had left Crown Prince Edward helpless. Disraeli felt relieved after thinking this, so he put his energy into how to ask Britain to get some benefits from the Netherlands to whitewash his performance as the Prime Minister. Russell heard Hespert van's explanation, although it was a bit far-fetched, but he had to say that what the Dutch foreign minister said made sense. It doesn't matter who gets the benefits, the key is to see how much or how little is given. The meaning of the Dutch foreign minister is very clear. I cooperate with you British just to give out less benefits. If not, it's better to give it to other countries. Why bother to come all the way to Britain to see your face? Thinking of this, Russell let go of this handle, otherwise it would seem that he was a little petty and kept holding on to the weakness of the Netherlands, which only embarrassed William IV and Queen Victoria, who were quietly listening to their negotiations. Russell said seriously, the British Empire is willing to make friends with the Netherlands. This is why our Queen of England invited His Majesty William IV of the Netherlands to visit this time. The key is that Britain needs to ease relations with the Netherlands. Of course, the specific regulations are what we are going to discuss now. I don't know what the Netherlands thinks Britain can get from it, and what the Netherlands wants to get from Britain. This is the focus of the negotiation and the highlight of this visit. Ross's words made William IV and Queen Victoria stop drinking tea, even though the de Hong Pao in the Far East is a top-quality tea. Hespert van paused, raised his head and cast a questioning look at William IV. William IV nodded slowly at him under the gaze of several people. Hespert van received the signal, looked at Russell with sharp eyes, and said, the Netherlands feels that Britain is currently not harmonious in North American relations, so the Netherlands is willing to help Britain ease relations with the United States of America. Queen Victoria's heart moved, and she looked at William IV curiously. Russell immediately asked her doubts. But even though the Netherlands has gained control of the American Parliament, it seems difficult for them to influence the overall diplomatic situation between Britain and the United States, Disraeli said at this time. Although you Dutch have a huge influence in the American Commonwealth, don't forget that there are other people who restrict you. President Lincoln and Secretary of State Seward will not agree easily. Does the Netherlands want to use legislative power and personnel power as a trade to help Britain ease relations with the American Commonwealth? No, that's not right. I think if the Netherlands does this, it will cause dissatisfaction with the Netherlands' influence in the American Commonwealth. Many anti-British people will stand on the side of the Irish and Germans, which will be disadvantageous to the Dutch in the next midterm election and the general election at the end of this year. That's right. The British were all old hands. After they figured it out, they didn't think that the Netherlands' help in easing relations with the American Commonwealth would do more good than harm. Haspert van did not comment, but said solemnly, the Netherlands has its own way to help Britain. Of course, the premise is that Britain can lend a helping hand to the Netherlands on European issues. How to help? Russell asked. We have recently organized the Nordic Alliance of the three countries of Holland to hold exercises in the Norwegian Sea and the Baltic Sea. We have invited the Russian Empire to become an observer country. So Your Majesty's visit to the UK this time is also with sincerity. We want to invite the UK to become an observer country of the exercise as well. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 378 Lincoln, Fire the Secretary of State? What did European and American observers say after William Ivy's speech on Anglo-Dutch policy in the House of Commons? Hugh Smith, president of Cambridge University, pointed out, William Ivy's speech was great and substantive in many ways, but for me, it failed to convey a sense of urgency. After listening to this speech, you will infer that the track of competition between the Netherlands and Britain is not affected, and we just need to keep up. He also said that William Ivy stated that the Netherlands will cooperate with Britain in many areas of common interests, and differences should not prevent the two peoples and the world from moving forward on major priority issues that require cooperation between the two sides. After William Ivy's speech, experts on Anglo-Dutch relations and Dutch diplomatic relations quickly gave a brief analysis and evaluation of the speech of the Dutch House of Commons in various circles in the UK. William Ivy specifically mentioned the situation of easing hostility between Britain and the Netherlands. His Majesty pointed out that ensuring peace and stability in the North Atlantic Sea and the English Channel between the Netherlands and Britain is not only in the interests of the Netherlands and the British Empire, but also of France, Belgium and the international community. This is crucial to the security and prosperity of the European continent, both sides of the Atlantic and even the world. Lecturer Zarek also wrote, the lack of confrontation, it is not enough to simply recognize the actions taken by Amsterdam and London to the global order, and it is also necessary to respond to the concerns of other countries. The two countries should have a common vision and be more transparent. He also suggested that William Ivy should not just assume that the Netherlands can reach a higher level with Britain without asking for help from Britain. Brown, chief researcher and director of the Netherlands Amsterdam Peace Research Institute, wrote, His Majesty William Ivy's speech on Britain and the Netherlands well places the Dutch-British relationship in a broader Dutch security strategy, including Britain's domestic policies in the Netherlands and abroad. This is worth looking forward to changes in Anglo-Dutch relations. Krim, director and chief researcher of the Netherlands Australia Institute, also said, William Ivy made a good statement about the importance of intimidation to maintain peace and stability in Anglo-Dutch relations for broader global security and stability. In addition to these positive comments, some observers also pointed out the shortcomings in the content of William Ivy's speech. In his speech, William Ivy emphasized that the Netherlands had no intention of bowing to Britain, nor did he seek to prevent the development of the domestic affairs of the Commonwealth of America in the direction of favoring the Dutch in power, and would not lower his tone towards Prussia and France. This attitude disappointed Rowan Elson, president of Oxford University and dean of the School of Diplomacy. I think this lowers the expectations of the relationship between Britain and the Netherlands by several tones, and I am very sad about this. William Ivy delivered an important speech in the British House of Commons, outlining the Kingdom of the Netherlands' policy towards Britain. In his speech, he stated that the Netherlands will develop strategic relations between the two countries based on Britain's willingness to establish a closer relationship with the Netherlands. The Netherlands also told its British counterparts that the Netherlands will shape a strategic environment that is favorable to the Netherlands and push the Netherlands to realize its vision of an open and inclusive international system. Tim, director of the Dutch governance project at the National Peace Foundation in Rotterdam, also gave a positive evaluation of the speech, but he said that the Netherlands still has difficult problems to solve with the UK. He wrote, "This is a good speech and a wise move to deal with difficult challenges, but how to convince the UK that it can develop and prosper without changing or harming the interests of the Netherlands, and the two countries jointly make international rules that are beneficial to the UK and the Netherlands, will be a problem for the UK and the Netherlands in the next few years. In Berlin, Prussian Prime Minister Bismarck said, "Britain and the Netherlands are both important neighbors of the Kingdom of Prussia. Their exchanges and easing of tensions are very important to Prussia. Prussia will pay close attention to the development of Anglo-Dutch relations. Accordingly, Prussia will respond accordingly." Napoleon III, Emperor of the Third French Empire, was asked in Paris by Queen Victoria what impact the invitation of William IV of the Netherlands to visit Britain would have on France, and whether he had any concerns. Napoleon III said, "There is nothing to worry about. The French Empire is a world power. We only care about the practical problems at hand and will not make too many moves for the sake of fictitious long-term relationships. However, Britain and the Netherlands are very important to France, so Paris will also pay close attention to what is happening in London. We reserve the right to make further responses. Of course, I think the French Empire will maintain its relationship with them for some time, especially now that the relationship between the Netherlands and France has eased due to North American reasons." U.S. President Lincoln said, "Although the relationship between Britain and the United States is tense, as neighbors, Britain and the United States naturally hope that their neighbors will reduce unrest. The Netherlands has a great influence on the United States, which has also had a significant impact on the United States. Therefore, the White House will pay attention to the ongoing secret talks between the two countries. If there is an agreement involving the United States, we will respond as soon as possible." Amsterdam, the Netherlands. When asked about William IV's speech in the British House of Commons, Dutch Prime Minister Talbeck said, "The Netherlands will deepen its relations with Britain. After all, Britain is the country with the greatest influence in the world. Whether it is in Africa, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, as well as North America, South America and Europe, we need to maintain a certain connection with Britain, because the Netherlands also has important interests in those places." In short, the relationship between the Netherlands and Britain will affect the local interests of the Netherlands and Britain. A relaxed and cooperative relationship between the Netherlands and Britain is beneficial to both sides. This is the purpose of Her Majesty's visit to Britain. The international community has aroused heated comments because of William IV's visit to Britain. April 21, 1868. London, Buckingham Palace. Only William IV and Queen Victoria attended the talks. Standing next to the Queen was Princess Louise, and next to William IV was the director of the Netherlands International Intelligence Agency, Mika Shan. Your Majesty does not agree with this. On the issue of Greece, the Netherlands is the main body and Britain is the auxiliary. No matter what, the King of Greece is from the Nassau-Orange family. Your Majesty, William IV is wrong. If our British Empire had not supported your father William II, I think the two princes of Emmanuel II and the Prince of Prussia might have been the heirs, so Britain made a lot of efforts. You know, Europe has always been ruled by the big powers. Does it mean that the Netherlands is no longer a big power?" William was not dissatisfied, but smiled and said, "It is precisely because of Britain's contribution, and in order to show that the Netherlands agrees to share the results, I will propose that my brother Crown Prince Frederick marry Princess Louise and let her become the future Queen of Greece." Queen Victoria stared at William IV, and finally, after seeing her daughter Princess Louise's shyness, she sighed, "Well, you do have a point, but..." Seeing the Queen softened, William IV, in a good mood, asked, "But what?" Queen Victoria asked inquiringly, "Let's talk about the previous topic, the relationship between the United States of America and Britain. How do you help ease it?" "It's very simple. Since we have an agreement with Britain, it was naturally pushed by the Dutch to complete it. The Senate Speaker and several ministers in the government are powerful, but they don't seem to have great power. You know, Lincoln is very hostile to us," Queen Victoria said, and suddenly she was stunned, and then she looked at William IV with shock in her eyes. Princess Louise, who has been an unofficial secretary to Queen Doria for several years, also thought of a possibility at this time. She looked at William IV in shock. Facing the unbelievable expressions of the two, William did not answer, but looked at Mike and Shaw next to him. Seeing William IV's appearance, the two people's eyes fell on the Dutch intelligence director, who was standing upright behind William IV. McKay Sean said expressionlessly, "Everything is ready. President Lincoln of the United States of America and Secretary of State Seward will face gun harassment next week." "Gun harassment?" This description is strange. How to describe it? It seems to have a hint of indifference and tenderness. Someone was leading the rhythm, and the news in the United States of America that President Lincoln was going to remove Seward from the position of Secretary of State became more and more intense. On April 22, 1868, among the 3 or 4 million Germans in the country, nearly 1 million Prussians participated in the demonstration, and hundreds of thousands of other Germans also participated. In other words, nearly half of the 4 million Germans in the United States of America participated, and the remaining Germans obviously did not want to offend the powerful Irish and Dutch in order to destroy the Prussians in their country. Even these 1 or 2 million people were enough to cause a huge response in the United States of America. You have to know that during the February Revolution in France in 1830 and the July Revolution in 1847, the number of participants was just that large. Moreover, millions of people are now complaining about the removal of a Secretary of State, which is a challenge to the Constitution of the United States of America. Therefore, many authoritative figures in the United States of America have come out to criticize the actions of these Prussians and Germans. However, these people who were provoked could not listen to them. Many angry people even threw radical eggs and stones at their homes after knowing the addresses of these authoritative figures, causing social panic. The society began to criticize and demanded that President Lincoln quickly quell this turmoil. At this time, Lincoln naturally could not hide anymore. So Lincoln began to ask the Prussians and these Germans who participated in the march to be dissuaded at the cabinet meeting, and suppressed them when he had no choice. At that time, several Germans in the cabinet government were opposed by Seward, and the cabinet meeting process was abandoned. When this news came out, the world was shocked, and they demanded the removal of these Germans from their positions, and even senators and congressmen proposed dismissal proposals. Chapter 379, Bismarck's intervention in North America was rejected. Lincoln watched the drama. 1868, William IV ended his visit to Britain and began to return to Amsterdam. At the same time, in Washington, on the west coast of the Atlantic Ocean, President Lincoln gave a public speech on this theme in order to quell domestic disputes. No one, including himself, expected that this would be the last public speech in President Lincoln's life. The speech involved the federal government's policies and opinions on disputes among people of different ethnicities in the country, and the handling of Prussian Secretary of State Seward. In the public speech, Lincoln reiterated his dissatisfaction with the independent establishment of the states of the Southern Confederacy, hoping that these states would consciously return to the embrace of the North and the lenient treatment policy of the Northern federal state. He proposed that as long as 10% of the white people in the South took the oath of allegiance and formed a state government, they could rejoin the Northern Union. He said that the North would have reason to negotiate with President Davis of the Southern Confederacy and his cabinet government. However, these words caused dissatisfaction in the Southern Confederacy, and Davis even personally sent a telegram to protest Lincoln's interference in domestic affairs. Domestic actions were unacceptable. We are very dissatisfied with Lincoln's words. Please take care of your own little piece of land and don't interfere with other people's land. Don't forget that your own country is in a mess now. If you can't manage your own affairs well and want to manage others, be careful not to shoot yourself in the foot. In addition to calling on the Southern Confederacy to return to the big family of the North, Lincoln also expressed dissatisfaction with the disputes among different races in the United States of America. He started with his catchphrase, "Do not treat anyone with resentment, but show kindness to everyone." In his opinion, the war has brought too much suffering and separation to the people. He hopes that the living people will not be slaughtered. He said that he hopes there will be no bloody persecution after the war. No one should expect me to support the act of hanging or killing them, even if these people have committed heinous crimes. He said that the United States of America does not need hatred, but peaceful coexistence. However, Lincoln's words were not recognized by people of different races. He may have realized that different races are their backers to protect themselves, but he did not expect that what he said not only did not exchange for the gratitude of different races, especially Prussians and Germans, but instead made the hatred of these people who marched and demonstrated against the president for special treatment grow like weeds. At 9 a.m. on April 23, 1868, Bismarck, the Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Prussia, held a press conference at the Chancellery in Berlin. He condemned Lincoln's different treatment of Prussians and Germans from other ethnic groups in the United States of America. He declared that Prussia was dissatisfied with the Lincoln government's treatment of Germans and asked President Lincoln to take more actions to ease the internal tensions in the United States of America and unite all ethnic groups, rather than creating divisions. At the same time, he called on the Lincoln government to analyze the dissatisfaction of Prussians and Germans in holding marches and address their concerns. In the afternoon of the same day, the White House expressed dissatisfaction with Bismarck's interference in the internal affairs of the United States of America and asked Bismarck to prevent such incidents from happening again. If such actions by the Kingdom of Prussia occur again, the United States of America will choose to make a firm response. No one knows what response the Lincoln government will make, but it must be a bad counterattack against Prussia. The Prussians and even the entire German race naturally expressed dissatisfaction with this. They gathered outside the White House in Washington the next day and demanded that Lincoln retract his condemnation of Bismarck. However, the White House ignored this and instead condemned the Prussians for forcing their own president to help a foreign country, which was an act of disloyalty to the United States of America. This is really a big deal. Disloyalty to the United States of America? This is equivalent to the Prussians and some Germans who were marching being treasonous. This made many observers change color. But think about it, anyway. It is the president's right to dismiss cabinet members. Now not only has the Prussians' dissatisfaction turned into opposition, but they also coerced Lincoln to make changes, and they also coerced Bismarck of Prussia. This is a provocation to President Lincoln and a challenge to American justice. No wonder President Lincoln was so angry. Of course, as the Prussian San Francisco Times said, President Lincoln may have deliberately chosen this time to attack the Prussians for his own political interests. Obviously, the Dutch were strong. So Lincoln attacked the Prussians at this time to ease the relationship with the Dutch and change the current situation that was unfavorable to Lincoln and the Irish. Of course, since the German newspapers were not very influential, few people paid attention to it, although what it said was somewhat reasonable. On April 24, 1868, Lincoln held a cabinet meeting and decided to cancel the position of Secretary of State Seward. Everything went smoothly, and the depressed president finally smiled. At the suggestion of his wife Mary Lincoln, they decided to go to Ford's Theater to watch a play in the evening to relax. Newspapers and theater posters made a big fuss about it, and actor John Wilkes Booth also saw the news on the theater posters. After hurriedly returning to his residence, he saw Powell and Frank there. John Wilkes Booth, President Lincoln will be watching a play at Ford's Theater tonight. I think tonight is the best time to complete the task. Powell nodded. Seward has been fired as Secretary of State. Now the Prussians are furious. If Lincoln makes a mistake, I, an Irishman, would be angry and retaliate against Seward. It is in line with my identity. Isn't it reasonable? Frank, since you all think tonight is the best time, I don't object. But be careful not to get caught. Even if you are caught, remember to disclose your original intention with your two ethnic identities. In this way, your descendants will get huge help. Powell and John Wilkes Booth both nodded. In appearance, John Wilkes Booth was born into a famous drama family, had superb acting skills, and a handsome appearance. He was deeply loved and admired by female fans, but Lincoln also had a shocking identity. He was a member of the Prussian nationalist group, the Skull and Bones Society, and was a strong supporter. He became famous recently because he had organized a group to plan to kidnap Lincoln to let the Prussians and Germans who had recently marched vent their dissatisfaction, but was eventually dissuaded, it was said to be Seward, and did not implement it. Lincoln dismissed Seward's position in the morning, which made him very angry. He accidentally learned that the Lincolns were going to Ford's Theater to watch a play, and he was overjoyed. This overjoyed was his godsend opportunity to assassinate Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth was a popular actor, and this identity provided him with convenience in entering and leaving the theater, and even the president's guards were not wary of him. At 10 o'clock that evening, John Wilkes Booth pretended to be calm and walked towards the presidential box. Guard John Parker was supposed to be guarding the way leading to the box, but he was not interested in watching the show, so he hid in an empty box next to it to drink. Chapter 380 Lincoln is assassinated and Andrew succeeds to the throne. The commuter guard went out to drink, and the lock of the box was not locked. No, he saw that it was broken. Oh my God, was this a godsend? Lincoln deserved to be killed by him? This provided John Wilkes Booth with more convenience for assassination. John Wilkes Booth even suspected that Frank had already arranged it, otherwise how could he enter Lincoln's box so easily? The negligence of the guard and the absence of the police, plus the failure of the door lock, These three major mistakes allowed John Wilkes Booth to enter President Lincoln's box smoothly. After entering the box, John Wilkes Booth saw the familiar face in the newspaper every day. In Lincoln's accident, John Wilkes Booth took out a gun hidden behind his back. In the horror expression of Mary Lincoln, Mrs. Lincoln, who was surprised and unable to react, he aimed the gun at Lincoln. The sinful bullet shot into the left ear and back of President Lincoln. Although there were more than 1,000 spectators, few people heard the gunshot at the moment of the tragedy, because John Wilkes Booth chose to shoot at the climax of the drama, when the audience was all watching the performance. The gunshots were mixed with the applause and laughter of the audience, and it was difficult to identify. After completing the assassination mission, John Wilkes Booth jumped from the box to the stage, turned around and shouted to the audience, "All tyrants have this end. Long live the great Prussians." Everything happened so fast and so suddenly that the audience didn't even know whether it was a drama plot or reality. Everyone was stunned, and John Wilkes Booth took this opportunity to escape. However, with the screams of terror coming from the box, people recognized that it was President Lincoln's box. As the police rushed in frantically, Lincoln, covered in blood, was carried away on a medical stretcher. Although he was still breathing, it was obvious that he was breathing out more than breathing in, which made Frank next to him smile. That night, Washington banned the city and locked down the city to search for the murderer and maintain law and order. Everyone who spent a tense night had bad news the next morning. President Lincoln closed his eyes forever in a private apartment near the theater. Lincoln's assassination and successful assassination caused a huge shock both inside and outside the United States of America. Lincoln's death made the people of the entire United States of America grief-stricken. President Lincoln is likened to the captain of the ship of the United States of America. This image is appropriate and well-deserved. At the critical moment of the life and death battle between the free labor system and the slave system of the United States of America, he led the Northern Confederation to fight a war to maintain progress and unity. Although the South eventually became independent, the North was reborn as a result. The internal chaos in the North was quelled, the slave system in the North was eliminated, and immortal contributions were made to the development of the United States of America. The Netherlands lost a very high-quality partner because of this. William IV of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. William IV's statement immediately won the gratitude of the people of the United States of America. Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom also stood up to express her opinion. He has a shining personality. He is determined, studious, modest and honest. He has beautiful words and is eloquent. He is witty and brave. He loves the people, advocates justice, is selfless and approachable. Under his leadership, the United States of America has embarked on a prosperous path. It is a great pity that he passed away. Britain has lost a respectable opponent. Lincoln is a great man and a monument. In the history of the United States of America, his contribution is enough to be on par with the founding father George Washington, Senate President and Vice President Andrew Johnson. After Lincoln was assassinated, Vice President Andrew Johnson was sworn in as president on the same day. Andrew Johnson was one of the opponents of Lincoln's policies. Although he disagreed with Lincoln, it did not prevent him from succeeding to the throne as the first heir to the presidency. The first thing Andrew Johnson did after he succeeded to the presidency was to issue a wanted order and do his best to track down the murderer who assassinated Lincoln. At this point, the Prussians and some Germans were in danger. They found that they seemed to be suspected of being the murderer. For this reason, no one was willing to march on the streets. Obviously, the development of the situation shocked them. On the contrary, the Irish were the ones who marched and demonstrated. You should know that there are more than 6 million Irish people in the United States, accounting for more than a quarter of the 23 million population of the United States. This force is more than half that of the Germans, including Prussia. Their influence is very terrifying. In front of them, the Germans felt pressure. It seems that hatred is spreading between the two ethnic groups. Many Germans, especially those who did not participate in the march before, complained about it. They wished that Andrew Johnson, who had just succeeded to the presidency, would quickly catch the murderer to clear their name. Prussian Kingdom, Berlin. Opposite Bismarck sat William I, Moltke and Crown Prince Frederick. I didn't expect it to happen to this extent. Lincoln was assassinated. Long live the great Prussians. Bismarck had a headache. This sentence made the Prussians feel like they had put a handful of mud on their crotch. It was shit if not shit. Bismarck's words made everyone else not in agreement. Crown Prince Frederick said with great concern, "The current situation is very unfavorable for Prussia. The phrase "long live the great Prussians" has already revealed that the Prussians are the biggest suspects. No matter what, the Prussians have become the least popular ethnic group in the United States of America. How can we help them? Chief of the General Staff Moltke could no longer remain calm at this moment and said, "You know, there are more than 1.3 million Prussians living there, accounting for about 1/3 of the entire German population." Only William I remained calm, but his frowning action still betrayed that he was not calm in his heart. Bismarck has always been unfathomable, and William I has great trust in him. The two have a tacit understanding for a long time. Sure enough, after a pause, Bismarck said in a somewhat harsh voice, "Andrew deliberately distinguished the Germans before, making the Prussians the target of many Germans to distance themselves from each other. Now the Prussians are suspected of being the biggest murderers." Obviously, the situation in the United States of America is not favorable to the Prussians now. So in order to improve their living environment, we are not without solutions. What solutions? Crown Prince Frederick couldn't help but ask anxiously. "Your Highness, the Crown Prince should remember how the Netherlands helped the Dutch in South Africa when the British Empire sent more than 100,000 troops to help South Africa, making it difficult for the Dutch Boers to win. Crown Prince Frederick, we negotiated with Britain, transferred the Boer territory in South Africa in exchange for benefits, and got the Australian continent." Crown Prince Frederick was very envious of the Netherlands for getting the Australian continent. He even complained that his mother-in-law, Queen Victoria, was too generous. She should have been able to deal with the Netherlands with New Zealand. Even if it was a replacement, it should be with Prussia. Even as a son-in-law, he could push Prussia to transfer Namibia in the northwest of South Africa to Britain to strengthen Britain's presence in southern Africa. Bismarck nodded first, then shook his head and said, "In fact, that is only one of the important goals of the Netherlands. The other goal of the Netherlands is that the smart William IV pays more attention to the population problem of the Netherlands. The 400,000 or 500,000 Dutch people in South Africa are what William IV cares about the most. After all, the population shortcoming of the Netherlands has caused the Netherlands to develop into a powerful country." The eyes of Crown Prince Frederick lit up. "What the Prime Minister means is that we can also take the Prussians of the American Commonwealth." Chapter 381 The Jealousy of Napoleon III. 1868, Bismarck called on the Andrew Johnson cabinet government to calm down in Berlin. "None of us wants to see unrest. The death of President Lincoln is very regrettable. We also condemn the assassin. Prussia does not want the friendship between Prussia and the United States to be seriously damaged because of individual reasons. At the same time, we call on Prussians and Germans who are willing to stay in the United States to respect local laws. At the same time, we also make a statement here. If you are willing to return to Prussia, you can return to Prussia. We welcome this. The Great Prussia welcomes your return." Prussia's statement seems to be asking the Andrew government to treat Germans including Prussia well. In fact, another call provides another option for these Prussians and even Germans. Obviously, Prussia is taking the opportunity to dig up Germans in the United States, which makes the Andrew government very dissatisfied. On April 27, 1868, President Andrew Johnson nominated New York capital tycoon Alton as the new Secretary of State. Due to the situation in the United States, the Senate voted the next day and was quickly approved. After all, that was Andrew's former base. Alton became the Secretary of State, which made many people in the United States change color, and even many senior officials in European countries showed solemnity. Why? It turned out that the new Secretary of State Alton was not a small person. He was a 35-year-old Dutchman, and only a second-generation immigrant of Dutch descent. The most important thing was that the Randy family had always had close contacts with the royal family of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Grandfather Randy Alton just celebrated his 80th birthday a few days ago and is currently a Dutch earl. His 58-year-old father Randy Blash is currently the helmsman of the New York Consortium, the largest consortium in the United States. He operates oil, coal mining and banking in the United States, and has shares in nearly 1/3 of the large companies in the United States. He can be called the economic giant of the United States. Now the second generation of the Randy family has entered the Andrew government and held a high position. Obviously, the Randy family is clearly expressing their support for Andrew Johnson, which is to help consolidate the presidential status of Andrew Johnson, who is of Dutch descent. French Empire, Paris. The Netherlands is too smart. This is using the power of the people to control the political power of the United States of America. This not only avoids the disgust of ordinary Americans, but also blocks the mouths of other countries that want to intervene. Prime Minister Olivier sighed, "Your Majesty, the Netherlands made a good move. Prussia and the Netherlands are one step forward and one step back. In this way, the strength of the Netherlands in the United States of America will be further expanded. I am afraid that the country with the greatest influence in the United States of America must be the Netherlands." Napoleon III was silent for a long time. He was envious in his heart, but helpless. Similarly, if the French Empire is allowed to do what the Netherlands did, the American people will be very vigilant because the French Empire is too powerful. Therefore, every move of France will be magnified, making it difficult for France to move forward. It's all because the French Empire is too powerful. Olivier also agreed very much. Ever since Washington launched the Tea Party movement and established the American Confederation, the United States has been very wary of big countries. In order to win over the American Confederation to deal with Britain's hegemony in North America, our French Empire chose to sell Louisiana to the American Confederation in 1803. Jefferson, the third president of the United States at the time, took this opportunity to consolidate the position of the American Confederation in North America. From then on, their position in North America was established. The French Empire later turned against the United States due to differences in policy toward Britain, which made the anti-British front between the two countries loose. Nowadays, the Americans do not trust the big powers, so the Netherlands is the only one that fits the image of an ally of the Americans. Other big powers cannot replace the position of the Netherlands. Napoleon III is certainly not a stupid man. If he were, he would not have been able to slowly turn over from a down-and-out nobleman to become the first president of the French Empire, and then restore the Napoleonic dynasty to become the emperor of the Third French Empire. He suddenly had a flash of inspiration, and said solemnly, "Perhaps this is the atmosphere deliberately created by the Dutch?" Oliver's face changed slightly, and he looked at Napoleon III in disbelief. "Don't look at me. After 8 years of interactions, aren't you familiar with William IV's calculating personality in our interactions? After the Franco-Prussian alliance, the Netherlands took advantage of it to seize many colonies in Africa and consolidate its position in Africa, which made Britain afraid to take action due to concerns about France and Prussia. Later, the Netherlands took advantage of the Russian Empire to gain a foothold in the Alaska Peninsula in North America, forcing Britain to remain silent about this normal transaction. Britain was even afraid that the Russian Empire would gain too deep a foothold in the Far East and affect Britain's dominant position there, so it chose to seize the western and northern parts of Borneo and traded Queensland to the Netherlands. Napoleon III paused, then said, "The Netherlands has been advancing their intentions step by step and in a planned manner. Right under our noses, they have completed the process like ants moving their houses. In just 5 or 6 years, the Netherlands has transferred more than 60% of its population to the Far East. In particular, the Australian continent, which has moved nearly 6 million people, has developed rapidly as a result and has now become the most dynamic economic zone in the Far East. The land is comparable to the whole of Europe, surrounded by the sea and has a natural safety environment. In addition, there are the Dutch East Indies in the west, New Guinea in the north, the South Pacific Islands in the east, Tasmania in the southeast, and Amsterdam Island and Kerguelen Islands in the southwest. Almost the entire Australian continent is under the protection of these surrounding islands. In this case, the development of the Netherlands seems to be secondary. The more Napoleon III talked about it, the more his ambition sank. Is this the rebirth of the Netherlands after the failure of the 4 Anglo-Dutch wars? Under the leadership of William IV, the Netherlands has been advancing all the way to achieve today's achievements, which can be said to have shocked the world. But what is the future of the French Empire? Thinking that the Netherlands has not only gained a foothold in the Far East, but also gained a huge influence in the entire Americas, the Emperor of the French Empire has to be jealous, and at the same time, he feels a heat on his face. In contrast to the Netherlands, a sense of urgency came over him. Napoleon III gritted his teeth and asked, "Is the resistance from the Kingdom of Siam still so strong?" The tone of Napoleon II's question made the French Prime Minister Olivier understand that Napoleon II's patience was almost worn out. Obviously, the impact of the Netherlands' success made His Majesty the Emperor lose face. Napoleon III, who had always been unwilling to fall behind, had turned back his face from other places when he had no idea where to start with the United States of America. Chapter 382, pointing to North Vietnam. It is difficult to advance. Your Majesty should know that the weapons supported by Britain are continuously imported through the British-occupied Lower Burma, and the Netherlands has also sent officer instructors to help the Kingdom of Siam train new recruits, so that the new soldiers of the Kingdom of Siam with a population of 7 million have a certain combat effectiveness. This makes it difficult for us to move forward in the Tonle Sap Lake and the Seine River area in the north. You know, it is a tropical area. Our soldiers are inherently at a disadvantage in front of the well-trained Siamese soldiers who are familiar with the weather and adapt to the geographical environment. Napoleon III naturally understood what his prime minister said, but he was still unwilling to accept it. Napoleon III asked unwillingly, "How many military forces do we have in the Far East now?" Olivier had guessed what His Majesty was thinking, so he said, 120,000, which almost accounts for 1/3 of the current 400,000 standing troops of the French Empire. Napoleon III frowned and said, 120,000, that's already a lot, how are they distributed? Olivier answered without hesitation, among them, there are 70,000 in Cambodia, the Kingdom of Siam, 20,000 in the southern part of Laos, and 30,000 in South Vietnam. The Navy has deployed a fleet of 5,000 people with a total of 20,000 tons in South Vietnam. Napoleon III asked again, what about the Kingdom of Siam? How are they distributed? Olivier took a breath, and then said, the Kingdom of Siam currently has a strength of 200,000, with 80,000 deployed around Bangkok. There are more than 50,000 troops in the three cities of Battambang, Pursat and Siem Reap west of Tonle Sap Lake in Cambodia, and more than 40,000 deployed in the west towards Myanmar. There are more than 40,000 deployed around Vientiane, the largest city in Laos in the north. They actually have 200,000 troops, 1 out of every 35 people joins the army, and the deployment is so tight? It seems that the Kingdom of Siam is planning to not give up an inch. Napoleon III did not expect that the Kingdom of Siam actually had an army of 200,000. Even in Europe, the only countries with a regular army of 200,000 troops are the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the French Empire, the Kingdom of Prussia, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, etc., and the only countries with a universal military model are Spain, Sweden, Italy, and the Netherlands. The United States currently has only 80,000 regular troops. A small Kingdom of Siam actually reached an astonishing 200,000. Which made Napoleon III feel as if he had just eaten a fly, very disgusting and uncomfortable. Your Majesty, I think if we insist on taking over the Kingdom of Siam, we may suffer serious injuries. Olivier looked at Napoleon III and saw his expressionless face, so he advised with some trepidation, I think we might as well pause. I think the state of universal military service in the Kingdom of Siam is unsustainable. After all, they also need to produce on a large scale to ensure the planting and harvest of grain. If all the able-bodied men are wasted on this, there will inevitably be a famine next year. That will be our chance to take action. Napoleon III agreed with the statement and worriedly said, the victory of the Netherlands has caused many people in the French Empire to complain about your cabinet government. The opposition has begun to attack you and me. If we achieve some results, it will be very difficult for you and me to have a good time. Olivier naturally knew all this, but given the current situation in the Kingdom of Siam, it was obvious that it would be difficult for the French Empire to win quickly, so he was also very worried about it. As if seeing Oliver's helplessness, Napoleon III felt proud. He said, everything starts with the easy and ends with the difficult. Since it is not easy to take over the Kingdom of Siam now, why don't we take over a place that is easier to take first? What does your Majesty mean? Oliver's heart moved. And then he thought of a place. Napoleon III saw Olivier wake up and nodded at him, there are many forces in North Vietnam in chaos. Olivier got a clear answer, hesitated for a while, and asked carefully, it is a vassal state of the big country in the north. Will it cause their dissatisfaction? Don't worry, a few days ago, I just received news that one of their generals surnamed Zuo has led their most powerful military forces to the west of their empire. According to the telegram sent back by our missionaries in their country, it is said that it may take about 10 years. So didn't you see that Britain is already attacking northern Burma, which is also a vassal state of the northern big country? Obviously, London is not afraid of this. Seeing Napoleon III so sure, Olivier breathed a sigh of relief, and then he was happy. So he hurriedly entered Napoleon II's mind, and the two conspired together to change the strategy of the next Far East offensive. On April 30, 1868, the sixth day after the assassination of former President Lincoln of the United States of America, a move by the French Empire immediately diverted a lot of attention from North America. Even William IV and Queen Victoria of England could not help but frown at the telegram in their hands. The French Empire actually abandoned the attack on the Kingdom of Siam and Cambodia in the west, and instead attacked North Vietnam by land and sea in the north. William IV was shocked when he saw the news. It was different from history. The French Empire attacked the north before taking over the entire Cambodia. Could it be that they were not afraid of the Far Eastern superpower in the north? William IV was very puzzled. Now was not 30 or 40 years later. Although the current great power had just experienced the Yapian War, its national strength had not weakened much. Japan had not yet risen, and the Meiji Restoration had just been launched. At this time, this island country was just an indigenous country, although the major Western powers had already infiltrated into their country through plundering exchanges. They had not experienced the Taiping-Shanguo movement. Even if Britain was in Burma at this time, it was only after they signed the contract that the country did not care about West Burma and Lower Burma that Britain dared to take action openly. Obviously, as the most powerful global power, Britain was so unwilling to defend the northern superpower. Did Napoleon III want to rely on the French Empire's hundreds of thousands of troops in the Far East and think that he could take down a vassal state that had been in the country for hundreds of years? Puzzled, he summoned Foreign Minister Husband von to ask about the movements in the Far East. He wanted to get a glimpse of where Napoleon II's courage came from. He did not believe that Napoleon III was a reckless person. "What, you said, there's a rebellion in the northwest of the superpower in the Far East?" The left general of that country gathered the whole country's strength to march to the west. William IV immediately understood where Napoleon II's confidence came from. In history, it seems that this war lasted until after 1878. Napoleon III, that old guy, actually saw that the other party could not do anything to him in the short term, so he wanted to make a quick decision. By that time, the rice was cooked and the rice was cooked. When the superpower returned from the westward expedition, France had consolidated its rule. At the same time, with the cunning of Napoleon II and other French people, there is no doubt that they might unite with other countries to test the northern superpower. The north was exhausted and injured because of the westward expedition, and its vitality was greatly damaged. In the end, when people saw through its own weaknesses, in order to maintain their rule, they could only bear the pain of cutting flesh and recognize the status of the French Empire as the colonial suzerain in North and South Vietnam. It was a good calculation. Chapter 383. Who is the mastermind behind the chaos in North America? The invasion of North Vietnam by the French Empire caused many people to be suspicious. As the news of the superpower in northern Southeast Asia launching a campaign against the Western rebellion spread in Western countries, many people understood the intention of Napoleon III. With a British attack in northern Burma, everyone understood that the colonial status of these two European powers in the Far East and Southeast Asia was increasingly consolidated. However, the Far East is too far away, and the situation on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean has successfully consolidated the attention of many Europeans. After Lincoln was assassinated, Vice President Andrew Johnson was sworn in as president and asked to investigate the progress of Lincoln's assassination, which has always been the focus of many people. On May 3, 1868, former Secretary of State Seward was stabbed at home. Although he did not die, he was seriously injured. The United States was shocked, and the world was shocked again. Moreover, the murderer was not caught, but the evidence left behind was obviously that he was an Irishman. Is this a contest between the two major ethnic groups in the United States? Andrew Johnson was very angry about this. When did our country become a paradise for criminals? No, we don't need such a life. No one wants to live in such a world of terror. No one wants to. So he angrily ordered that the suppression of the demonstrations be stepped up, and that the major media of the United States of America conduct propaganda that is conducive to management and guide people out of fear. On both sides of the Atlantic, an article specifically discussing this issue in the influential Dutch weekly Echo caused a global sensation. The top leaders of various countries are even more on guard, because many people understand that the United States of America seems to be making trouble again. The headline on the Echo is, Are the assassinations of Lincoln and Seward really accidental? The interviewee of the Echo Weekly this time is Charles Eliot, the president of Harvard University, which has become the oldest and most influential university in North America since 1863. Why do I bring this up? Because few people realize it, but the broader scope of the Abraham Lincoln assassination, we have to admit, was far more than the murder of one man. It was actually part of a three-pronged attack designed to destabilize the entire United States. When that assassin shot Lincoln in the head with his pistol, the other assassin had almost reached his destination, the home of former Secretary of State Seward, just a few streets away from Ford's Theater where Lincoln was assassinated. This was extremely bad and difficult for the United States to accept. Charles Eliot speculated that, therefore, the full Abraham Lincoln incident was not only to kill the president, but also to dismiss the next president from office and plunge the United States into chaos when the hard-won peace of the Civil War that had just ended was strangled to a bloody end. He also said that Lincoln's murder himself did plunge the country into chaos. He further said that since Lincoln expressed his support for the voting rights of black slaves in order to attract the support of Northern blacks in the Civil War in 1863, many people were actually dissatisfied with him, especially the Confederate states of the South. This is the cleverness of the murderer. In this way, the president of Harvard University developed his own views. However, his views caused an uproar in Europe and the United States, because the president actually attacked a giant in Europe and the United States. Now many people do not understand why he did this. William Ivey showed his admiration and secretly said, "The editor-in-chief of the Echo, James, is getting more and more powerful." In the United States in the mid-19th century, which had not yet been divided, the debate about slaves was economic interests first and morality second. At that time, the pillars of the Southern economy were the cotton planting industry and slavery. If slavery was abolished, farmers would have to pay wages to the original slaves according to the market price of white labor. Then the entire Southern planting industry would fall into losses, and the social and economic structure would inevitably collapse. William Ivey understood this very well, not to mention those plantation slave owners. William Ivey looked at the Weekly Echo and couldn't help but smile bitterly, because he understood that this close academic ally of President Andrew was obviously helping Andrew to issue an ultimatum to other European financial groups in the United States. William Ivey understood that those Europeans could remain calm after reading the following interview with the president of Harvard University. Even the first European financial group could not. Charles Eliot said so. If war is a continuation of political struggle, then behind the conflict of political interests is the competition of economic interests. This competition of economic interests is superficially reflected in the economic differences between the North and the South, but in essence, it is the strategy of divide and rule played by international financial forces in order to split the newborn American Commonwealth. William Ivey remembered that in an article he had read in his previous life, it was said that Bismarck, the Prussian prime minister who had a deep connection with the Rothschild, the largest consortium in Europe, said it very thoroughly. There is no doubt that the money for splitting the American Commonwealth into two weaker federations in the North and the South had long been decided by the financial powers in Europe. Therefore, William Ivey had already used Bismarck's statement to follow up and verify it, and it was indeed the case. Charles Eliot also said, the bankers in the London, Paris, and Frankfurt axis were the masterminds behind the American Civil War. In order to provoke it, the international bankers in these places carried out long-term, careful and detailed planning. During the American War of Independence, the textile industry of the British Empire established close business ties with the slave-owning class in the southern United States. European financiers saw this opportunity and took advantage of it to secretly develop a network of people who could provoke conflicts between the North and the South in the future. In the South at that time, there were all kinds of agents of British Empire financiers everywhere. They worked with local political forces to formulate conspiracies to secede from the United States of America and fabricate various news and public opinions. They cleverly used the economic interest conflicts between the North and the South on the issue of slavery, constantly strengthening, highlighting and detonating this originally not so hot topic of the United States of America, and finally successfully catalyzed the issue of slavery into sharp contradiction between the North and the South. At the same time, international bankers are fully prepared, just waiting for the war to start and then make a fortune from the war. In the process of instigating the war, the effective strategy is to hedge their bets. No matter who wins or loses, the huge government debts caused by the huge war expenditures are the bankers' most abundant meal. Chapter 384 America's New Monetary Policy. 1859, the famous French banker Solomon Rothschild, son of James Rothschild, the helmsman of the first European consortium, came to America from Paris as a tourist. He looked ordinary, but no one knew that the heir of the first European consortium was actually the general coordinator of all plans. He traveled between the North and South of America, and had extensive contacts with local political and financial dignitaries. He constantly fed back the intelligence he collected to the first heir of Rothschild, his cousin Nathaniel Rothschild, who was based in London. In a meeting with local people, Solomon Rothschild publicly stated that he would strongly support the South in finance and that he would do his best to help the independent South gain recognition from European powers. The agent of international bankers in the North was August Belmont, a Jewish banker known as the King of Fifth Avenue in New York. William Ivey knew about the man mentioned by Charles Eliot. August Belmont was an agent of the Rothschild family bank in Frankfurt and a relative of the family. In 1829, August, who was only 15 years old, began his career as a banker. He initially worked for the Rothschild Bank in Frankfurt and soon showed his outstanding financial talent. In 1832, he was promoted to work in a bank in Naples. After honing his experience in the international financial industry and becoming familiar with German, English, French, Italian and Dutch, he was sent to New York on the other side of the Atlantic in 1837 to buy large amounts of American federal government bonds. He soon became a leading figure in the New York financial community. He was valued by Martin Van Buren, the Dutch-American president who had just won the vice presidential election, and was appointed as a financial advisor together with Randy Blash of the Randy family. In 1861, August represented the British Empire and the Rothschild Bank in Frankfurt, expressing their willingness to support Lincoln in the North financially. However, Rothschild invested more in the South. In order to increase military pressure on the Lincoln government in the North, at the end of 1861, the British Empire sent 8,000 troops to Canada, ready to support the attack of the Southern Confederacy and threaten the Lincoln government from the northern border. In 1862, Britain, France and Spain landed in the port of Mexico, assembled in the border area of the Confederate States of the United States of America, and entered the South to directly engage in direct confrontation with the Confederate States of America in the North when necessary. In 1863, under the order of Napoleon III, the French Empire General Girardot increased his troops by 30,000 and occupied Mexico City. In the early days of the war, the South's military offensive was victorious, and the Allied powers such as Britain and France were surrounded by powerful enemies. The Lincoln government fell into great difficulties. The bankers calculated that the Lincoln government's treasury was empty at this time. If huge financing was not carried out, the war would be unsustainable. Since the end of the war with the British Empire in 1812, the treasury revenue of the United States of America has been in deficit for many years. Even before Lincoln came to power, the budget deficit of the United States of America was sold to banks in the form of bonds, and then the banks monopolized the British Empire's Rothschild and Baring Bank. The United States of America needed to pay high interest for this. The accumulated debts over the years have made it difficult for the United States government to move forward. The bankers proposed many financing plans and offered conditions to President Lincoln. When our great president heard that the interest requirements offered by the bankers were as high as 20% to 30%, he was stunned. President Lincoln pointed at the door and asked these bankers to leave. This was a ruthless move that completely put the United States of America government in a state of bankruptcy. President Lincoln also knew at the time that the United States of America would never be able to repay this astronomical debt. Without money, it is impossible to wage a war, and borrowing money from international bankers is undoubtedly like putting a noose around one's own neck. Lincoln racked his brains for a solution. At this time, his old friend in New York, Randy Black, the head of the Randy family, the first financial group in New York, gave Lincoln an idea. Why doesn't the United States of America issue its own currency? Let Congress pass a bill authorizing the Treasury to issue currency with full legal force to pay soldiers' wages, and then go win the war we are facing. But President Lincoln asked the American people whether they would accept this currency. Randy Blythe said, "Everyone will have no choice on this issue. As long as you make this new currency fully effective and the government gives them full support, they will be as common as real money, because the Constitution grants the national emblem the power to fly and set currency." After hearing this suggestion, President Lincoln was overjoyed and immediately appointed Randy Blythe as his full-time financial advisor to plan this matter. President Charles Eliot exclaimed, "This groundbreaking method breaks the practice that the American federal government must borrow money from private banks and bear high interest rates. This new currency uses a green pattern to distinguish it from other currencies. It is called greenback. The uniqueness of this new currency is that it has no gold, silver or other monetary metals as collateral, and provides only 5% interest for 20 years. That is to say, from 1863 to 1882, the interest rate was only 5%. During the Civil War, due to the issuance of new currency, the Lincoln government finally overcame the serious currency devaluation in the early stages of the war, and greatly and efficiently mobilized various resources in the north of the United States of America, which ultimately won us victory. Although the South was still independent, we resisted the invasion originally planned by European countries. The victory really belonged to us, and we finally won the current solid economic foundation. At present, because this low-cost currency has become the reserve currency of our Northern United States of America Bank, the bank credit of the United States of America has been greatly expanded, and the military industry, railway construction, agricultural and industrial production and commercial trade have all received unprecedented financial support. Therefore, Randy Blythe at that time became one of the greatest contributors to the United States of America and the most influential person among the people of the United States of America. Seeing this, William IV smiled proudly. The discovery of gold in the United States since 1848 has gradually freed American finance from the extremely unfavorable situation of being completely dependent on the control of European bankers. It is precisely because of the large amount of high-quality currency as the basis of confidence that Lincoln's new currency can be widely accepted by the people, laying a reliable financial foundation for winning the Civil War. What is even more surprising is that the new currency issued by Lincoln did not cause severe inflation, similar to the War of Independence. From the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861 to the end of the war in 1867, the data in the hands of William IV showed that the price index of the northern United States was only a little more than double during the 7-Year War. Considering the scale and severity of the war, and compared with other wars of the same scale in the world, this can only be said to be a financial miracle. William IV also noticed that, on the contrary, the South also adopted the paper currency circulation method, but the effect was formally different. The price index of the Southern Confederacy rose to 3 times the original price during the same period until the end of the war. Throughout the Civil War, the Lincoln government issued a total of $450 million in new currency. The new currency-ing mechanism worked so well that the Lincoln government seriously considered issuing and legalizing this debt-free currency for a long time, which deeply hurt the fundamental interests of the international financial oligarchs. If all governments do not have to borrow money from banks but issue their own currency, the bankers' monopoly on currency issuance will no longer exist. Would the banks be left with nothing? William IV especially remembered that after hearing the news, the London Times, which represented the bankers of the British Empire, immediately issued a statement warning, if this disgusting new fiscal policy originating from the United States of America, known as the Lincoln Greenback, is made permanent, then the government can issue its own currency at no cost, it will be able to repay all debts and no longer be in debt, it will obtain the necessary currency to develop business, it will become an unprecedented prosperous country in the world, the world's outstanding talents and all wealth will flock to North America. This country must be destroyed, otherwise it will destroy every monarchy in the world. The British government and the New York International Banking Association under the Rothschild family angrily expressed their desire for revenge, and on December 28, 1861, they announced that they would stop paying financial currency to the Lincoln government. Some international banks in New York also organized gold depositors to withdraw gold and announced the withdrawal of their commitment to purchase American government bonds with gold. Banks from all over the United States responded one after another. They went to Washington to propose a workaround bill to President Lincoln and his advisor Randy Blythe, suggesting that they should still adopt the past practice of selling high-interest bonds to European bankers and deposit American gold in private banks as a reserve for the issuance of credit, so that bankers could make a fortune and the United States would levy taxes on the industrial sector and the people to support the war. However, President Lincoln, as a matter of course, firmly rejected the completely unreasonable request of the bankers, and his policy was deeply popular with the people. The people of the United States enthusiastically bought all the bonds and used them as cash according to the law. The bankers came up with another plan when one plan failed. They found that the bill for issuing Lincoln new dollars in Congress did not mention whether the interest on the national debt should be paid in gold, so they reached a compromise with members of Congress, that is, to allow Lincoln new dollar national debt, but the interest part should be paid in gold. This was the first step of a perfect plan. First, the domestic gold of the United States was linked to the Lincoln new dollar. At that time, the European bankers who had the British pound system, which had the world's currency reserves, had far more federal gold reserves than the United States. The compromise between the American bankers and Congress allowed the international financiers to use their control over the total amount of American gold imports and exports to indirectly manipulate the value of the American currency. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 385: The Old Earl of the Randee Family. After Lincoln freed the slaves and ended the Civil War, he immediately announced that all debts owed by the United States during the war were written off. The international bankers who had been providing huge financial support to the Northern Union during the war suffered heavy losses. In order to retaliate against Lincoln and to overthrow the new currency policy of the Lincoln regime, I suspect that these international bankers gathered various forces that were dissatisfied with President Lincoln and carefully planned the assassination. It can be found that it is not difficult to assign a few fanatics to carry out the assassination. After President Lincoln was assassinated, under the manipulation of international financiers, many members of the Congress of the United States of America declared that they wanted to abolish President Lincoln's new currency policy and freeze President Lincoln's new currency issuance to no more than $450 million. Some time ago, I had the honor of drinking tea with Secretary of the Treasury James and expressed my doubts to him. I asked him how much interest President Lincoln saved by issuing $450 million of new currency. Our Secretary of the Treasury James told me that the answer they got after several weeks of calculations was, because President Lincoln issued the American government's own currency, a total of $4 billion in interest for the United States of America. What I can tell you is that the American Civil War was fundamentally a struggle for interests between international financial forces and their agents and the American government over the right to issue American currency and monetary policy. The Echo reported this article by Harvard University President Charles Eliot, which was simply earth-shattering and made people know what it means to have the sky broken. Many things in the world are not coincidental. After the Echo exposed the assassinations of President Lincoln and Seward, which may have come from the international bankers who were behind the scenes, the United States was full of anger. So many places saw smashing and looting, and the international bankers, who were originally in a high position, instantly fell to earth in the United States. The American people were very angry. Even in the Southern Confederate States of America, many people began to question whether the Davis government's pro-British policy, the large-scale war bonds issued to the international financiers, were also a conspiracy to control their country. Europe, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Amsterdam, the Royal Palace of the Netherlands. The report of the Echo newspaper is like a sharp sword piercing the heart of the international bankers, making them no longer have a fig leaf and exposed to the American people. Your Majesty, the whole of America is full of anger towards the international bankers. Our plan to suppress the international financiers in the United States is going well. When Count Randy Walton said this, his old eyes flashed with a gleam of light, and when he looked at William IV, he was even more amazed. Although he just celebrated his 80th birthday a few days ago, he didn't look like such an old man at all. No wonder he always told everyone that he was not 80 years old, but only 18 years old, and he was still young. The Randee family has become the largest family consortium in the United States. His son Randy Black has become the helmsman there, and the family power is also thriving. The roots of the Randee family are in the Netherlands. Randy Alton, the actual helmsman of the Randee family, is still pointing out the direction of the Randee family's discovery. The Dutch East India Company was a sensation in the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries. It was the most powerful business organization in the world at that time, and it influenced the Netherlands' international exchanges. It was not until the end of the 18th century that it was swallowed up by Britain after 4 naval wars with Britain. The business of other countries shrank sharply, its strength declined greatly, and it was dissolved in 1800. However, despite this, Its structure is still there. The company, which consists of 6 local trading houses, used to be mainly engaged in colonial operations under the jurisdiction of the Netherlands. Its board of directors was allocated to 4 people from the Amsterdam Trading House, 4 people from the Zeeland Trading House, and 1 person from each of the other local trading houses. The 17th representative was elected by the small trading house. The total investment of the Amsterdam Trading House was half, the Zeeland Trading House accounted for a quarter, and the other 4 major trading houses each invested 1/16. This model continued until 1857, when William IV crossed over. As the Crown Prince of the Netherlands, William IV took the opportunity to join this team. Of course, oppression and threats were indispensable, and he became the largest shareholder, accounting for half of the shares. With the joining of William IV, the shares of other parties naturally needed to be reduced. The Amsterdam Trading House's share was reduced from half to 1/4, while the Zeeland Trading House became 1/8, and the other 4 trading houses also halved to 1/32 share. After the share was negotiated, the Dutch East India Company changed into the new clothes of the William Group and appeared internationally. Therefore, the original 17-member board of directors of the Dutch East India Company became an 18-member board of directors. The 18-member board of directors meets 3 times a year, and the meeting time is at least 7 days. The work of the board of directors includes the company's annual operating status report, observation of the operation of each trading house, and the preparation of accounting books. In the eyes of William IV, it basically has the prototype of the board of directors of modern joint stock companies in later generations. The history of the Lande family actually rose with the existence of the Dutch East India Company. Before the arrival of William IV, the Lande family's position in the East India Company was struggling every year to maintain the 17th representative elected by the small trading house. The share was very small, but with the arrival of William IV, and under the urging of Randy Orton, he took the opportunity to get close to William IV, and with the support of William IV, he suppressed dissidents and eventually replaced a family of one of the 4 major trading houses, becoming the owner of 1/32 of the shares of the Dutch East India Company. Later, with the support of William IV, he entered the Amsterdam Trading House and became the president, occupying 5% of the 1/4 share of the Amsterdam Trading House, and currently helping William IV control the William Group. William IV looked at the old man inside in his heart. He was indeed an old man who had worked in the Dutch East India Company for decades. His sharp eyes were definitely unattainable by many people, and he was more loyal. As a later generation, we naturally know the reasons for the American Civil War. From the fundamental point of view, it was actually the same as what the president of Harvard University said in The Echo, which was the result of a fierce struggle between international financial forces and their agents and the American government for the interests of the American national currency issuance rights and monetary policy. In the more than 100 years before and after the Civil War, both sides fought repeatedly and desperately over the establishment of the financial commanding heights of the central bank system of the United States of America. A total of 7 presidents of the United States of America were assassinated and many members of Congress died. It was not until 1913 that the Federal Reserve Bank system of the United States of America was established, which finally marked a decisive victory for international bankers. Chapter 386 What are the assets of the Dutch East India Company? However, by that time, the so-called international bankers, in fact, the largest ones, had become owned by the United States of America. Instead, they could use this to interfere in the internal financial affairs of other countries in the world, especially European countries. This makes people sigh that the tide has turned. As a person of later generations, William IV has a vision far beyond that of people of this era. The deployment is naturally ahead of time. William IV said, "The current situation in the United States is basically settled. Next, it depends on whether Andrew Johnson's governance is in place." Randy Orton nodded. President Lincoln of Irish descent was backstabbed, Prussia was suppressed, and former Secretary of State Seward of Prussia was backstabbed, and the Irish were suppressed. At present, these 2 ethnic groups have been much more low-key, and the Dutch are currently marching forward in the United States. The William Group has also begun to attack cities and pawns in it, absorbing a lot of the essence of the United States of America and strengthening the William Group. How is the development of the Randy family in the United States? William IV's question made Randy Orton pause, his face showing a serious expression. He said, "No one has ever challenged the position of the First Financial Group, but in recent years, The newly emerged Prussian Rockefeller Financial Group, the British Morgan Financial Group, and the French DuPont Financial Group have developed rapidly. The Rockefeller Financial Group has made great efforts in oil extraction, and it is said that it is preparing to establish Standard Oil Company. The Morgan Family Financial Group focuses on the insurance and banking industries, especially in the introduction of international capital. The DuPont Family Financial Group is developing in the gunpowder and firearms business. Especially during the Civil War, the DuPont Group can be said to have made a fortune from the war and officially entered the ranks of the first-class family financial groups in the United States. The Mellon family started out in the mining industry, and at the moment when the United States is developing rapidly, its development is not lagging behind the other three families, and the Mellon Bank is also in preparation, and it is said that it will be established next year. Obviously, the practice of the Lincoln family as an international banker has been used by all major financial groups to enter the banking industry. These 3 or 4 families are currently potential rivals of the Randy family. In addition to the Randy family, I remember that there are Citibank and Boston consortiums among the Dutch, right? Randy Alton's heart trembled. William Ivy's gentle question made him realize that this was a heavy blow. It is true that the Randy family is currently the first consortium in the United States, but the Dutch are not just the Randy family. The Citibank and Boston consortiums have a long history. They were the pioneers of the Dutch East India Company when it developed the port of New York. The reason why the Dutch were able to rise in the United States is actually inseparable from the strong support of these two consortiums and the cooperation with the Randy Family Consortium. The consortium headed by first Citibank and the Dutch arms production are closely related to large companies and enterprises. In addition, there is the Boston Consortium. These families invested the huge wealth accumulated from overseas colonial plunder in commercial banks, insurance businesses and investment companies, and rely on these financial institutions to provide funds to operate textile, leather, shoe, clothing, food and chemical industries. Due to the rapid development of the textile industry, now, with these families intermarrying with each other for generations, the Boston Consortium has been formed with Boston and the National Bank as the core. William Ivy seemed to say unintentionally, at present, these two major consortiums have invested huge sums of money in the Australian continent to develop the local economy. You know, the Australian continent needs to develop into our future base, and the investment of these Dutch people is very timely for us. Back and forth, these overseas Dutch people far away from their homeland expressed their love for the Netherlands in this way, which moved me deeply, so William Ivy looked at Randy Alton, who is a little unnatural, and said, I accepted their goodwill. Perhaps, in the near future, the honor of being granted the Dutch title will become a reality. Randy Alton said happily, that's great for the Netherlands. Well, William Ivy nodded and said, now that you 3 consortiums are in the United States, I can finally rest assured. Of the 10 major consortiums in the future United States, the Dutch controlled 2 of the 6 major consortiums, accounting for 1/3, and the Randy Family Consortium has emerged. With his help, it has occupied the position of the first consortium at an unprecedented speed. The 7 consortiums occupy 3. The status of the Netherlands will be difficult to shake in a short period of time. In addition, the Andrew government of the United States, which is controlled by the Dutch, has further consolidated the status of the Dutch under the collusion between officials and businessmen. At present, the strength of the United States is only acceptable in Europe, mainly reflected in the economy, and its military status is not obvious in Europe, but only William Ivy knows that it will be different in half a century. Perhaps the current monopoly of the Dutch will be broken, and its influence will be reduced, but it will be difficult for other families to replace it. Perhaps in the future, many people will question why William Ivy is so obsessed with the United States of America, and it seems that he has used a lot of Dutch resources on the United States. With all this energy, it is better to develop in the Netherlands. This statement is actually not bad, but the premise is that the Netherlands needs enough manpower. The white population of more than 10 million, plus the 20 million Asian and African races, these have contributed to the existence of the Netherlands to a certain extent. It is necessary to suppress 20 million people. After all, there is a saying that those who are not of my race must have different hearts. William Ivy naturally cannot fully develop the potential of these 20 million people of color. At least before the Dutch white population can't keep up, it is absolutely necessary to suppress the other side. In William Ivy's mind, These people of color will develop from the perspective of being at the bottom of society in the development of the Far East of the Netherlands, and will appear as workers in construction, infrastructure, and handicrafts. In order to obtain reliable and skilled labor, he will propose universal primary education under the jurisdiction of the Netherlands, in order to increase sufficient labor. However, in terms of secondary and higher education, as long as you observe carefully, you will find that the degrees here are increasingly biased towards Dutch whites. This is the class design concept of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And the people of color who can get promoted can only be kept in a very small part. It was at that time in the 21st century, 150 years after Lincoln liberated the black slaves, the United States of America, although their status was talked about every day, was still deprived by the whites. This is the reality. Moreover, the Dutch East India Company was originally the world's earliest colonial interest plunderer. The William Group, which was controlled by 18 directors, was actually the most staunch supporter of the Dutch whites. My Earl, tell me, how much assets does our Dutch East India Company, the William Group, currently have? Chapter 387. The Rothschild Hut appears at Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace, England. Queen Victoria received several people in her reception room today. In addition to Prime Minister Disraeli and Foreign Secretary Russell, there were also Prince Edward and a 60-year-old stranger. The person who spoke now was this stranger. When he spoke, even Queen Victoria, who is always indifferent to things, showed due respect. Foreign Secretary Russell and Prime Minister Disraeli lowered their posture and showed professional smiles. Even the usually arrogant Prince Edward became restrained at this time, with an unnatural humility on his face. Obviously, this stranger who was about the same age as Disraeli had a power that made the people present very afraid. It was the deep concerns from the bottom of their hearts that made them act in unison. In 1857, William IV, as the Crown Prince at the time, forcefully entered the Dutch East India Company, which was already in name only, and changed the structure of the previous 17-member board of directors to an 18-member board of directors. He became the largest shareholder and chairman, holding half of the shares. He then supported Randy Alton, the 17th representative selected by the small and medium-sized chambers of commerce to represent their interests among the 17th person, who was the lowest and most unstable in the 17-member board of directors at the time. He was appointed by William IV as the general manager of the Dutch East India Company. Randy Alton was a very far-sighted person. He saw the possibility of turning the company into a force in the Far East. For this reason, he did not hesitate to use brutal force to complete the 5-year long-term plan formulated by the 18-member board of directors headed by William IV. In 1860, Randy Alton moved the headquarters from Rotterdam to the new headquarters in Amsterdam. In order to cooperate with the ruling policy of the Dutch Kingdom government, he appeased the natives in the Far East through commercialization while supervising them. Later, in Australia and New Guinea, he killed or drove away the natives who opposed the Dutch rule. Randy Alton's second success was to help William IV establish a national trade system in Far East Asia, extending its trade footprint from the Dutch East Indies, the Pacific Islands, and New Guinea to Japan, the Korean Peninsula, the Northern Superpower, and the Kingdom of Siam, and conducting frequent cross-border trade with the Pacific region of America. In 1863, after the Dutch government acquired the Australian continent from Britain, the Dutch East India Company followed the Dutch government's migration policy and was planning to build a new headquarters in Sydney, preparing to move the European headquarters to Sydney. With the influence of the Netherlands around the world, the Dutch East India Company continued to build its own ports while acquiring land in various countries around the world to establish its own bases and ports. Its influence in the world was very large. Especially in America and the Far East, it was almost everywhere. Even in British colonies such as India and Malaya, the Dutch East India Company's business presence can be traced. Last year, the Dutch East India Company was already the world's largest company and the richest private company in the world, with more than 150 merchant ships, 20 battleships, 500,000 employees, and a private army of 10,000 mercenaries. The annual dividend exceeded 40%, so when the subscription of Dutch East India Company shares was in full swing, the shares of the Dutch East India Company were very popular. By 1867, the company's total assets exceeded 2.5 billion Dutch guilders, $500 million or 100 million pounds. When the subscription of Dutch East India Company shares was in full swing last year, The Dutch East India Company released a total of 25 million Dutch guilders for subscription. At that time, the Dutch guilder was 25 Dutch guilders, which was approximately equal to £1. Last year, the annual salary of a respected teacher in the Netherlands was £200 or 5,000 Dutch guilders. Half of the shares were subscribed in Amsterdam alone. The stranger smiled modestly at these British people of the highest status, and said, "I think the strength of the Dutch East India Company has threatened the interests of Britain. Perhaps it is time for us to curb it." The Queen just showed a momentary embarrassment on her face, which fell into the eyes of the stranger, making him understand that this mission to Buckingham Palace seemed a bit tricky. As for the people next to him, he found that except for the excitement on the face of Crown Prince Edward, he obviously agreed with this. Disraeli showed a little bit of joy and then hesitated, and Foreign Minister Russell hesitated. Obviously, these people seemed to have different positions, but it was obvious that except for Crown Prince Edward, they did not want to take action against the Dutch East India Company. However, the stranger in front of him was not in a hurry, as if he was just a proposer, but he knew that these people in front of him would eventually agree to him. Because his name is Lionel Rothschild. He is the eldest son and heir of Nathan Rothschild, who has passed away in the UK. Queen Victoria is now very embarrassed. Lionel in front of him is the richest man in Britain. He just talked about the many achievements of the Dutch East India Company, but Lionel in front of him did not talk about his own achievements. His father, Nathan Rothschild, came to London, England alone in 1798 and started a small cotton business. At that time, during the Napoleonic Wars on the European continent, some nobles from the German Confederation fled to England, including Count William of Frankfurt. In order to protect his property, Count William entrusted his father, Nathan Rothschild, to buy a large number of bonds issued by Britain. Nathan took the opportunity to start a bond and stock business. With his shrewdness and talent, Nathan soon became rich and became a giant in the financial securities industry in London. Later, he took the opportunity to provide huge military expenses to the British government and established close personal connections with military and political leaders in London, England. In 1836, Nathan Rothschild had become the richest man in Britain and almost the richest man in the world at that time, with assets exceeding £3 million. His eldest son, Lionel Rothschild, is also Nathan's most outstanding son. His talent in finance seems to have inherited his father's outstanding mind. Under the training of his father Nathan, he inherited Nathan's financial talent and showed extraordinary wisdom and business skills. In 1833, when Queen Victoria was still 6 years away from taking the throne, the British government borrowed £20 million from the Rothschild Bank. Lionel Rothschild personally operated a loan, and the organization was very successful. As a result, Lionel became famous in the British financial world. After Nathan Rothschild's death in 1836, Lionel Rothschild became the head of the British Rothschild family at the age of 28, and the bank's business was well managed in his hands. By 1852, the assets of the British Rothschild family doubled to £6 million, and by last year in 1867, Queen Victoria learned from the information at hand that the British Rothschild family already had more than £8.8 million, more than any family in the UK during the same period. Faced with such a giant crocodile that has been in the British business for more than 30 years, how can a few people remain calm? Chapter 388 Chapter 388 Whoever controls the currency controls Britain. Mr. Lionel is right. The Dutch East India Company has indeed developed too fast and has affected the interests of our British Empire, especially in America. Britain's previous share has been gradually eroded. It used to far exceed that of European countries, but now it is almost caught up by the Netherlands with the help of the anti-British policy of the American Federation. Now the huge size of the Dutch East India Company seems to suffocate people. In Buckingham Palace, the words of Crown Prince Edward interrupted the deadlock of several people. Foreign Secretary Russell opened his mouth, looked at Crown Prince Edward, and then looked at Lionel Rothschild, who seemed to be somewhat satisfied. Finally, he rationally chose to shut up. Prime Minister Disraeli took the opportunity to say, "What the Crown Prince said is right. I also agree with the threat of the Dutch East India Company. A few years ago, the total economic size of the Netherlands has reached half of that of the United Kingdom, but the United Kingdom has a population of 33 million, while the Netherlands has only 11 million Dutch and 20 million low-income people of color. Under such circumstances, the per capita income of the Netherlands seems to be far from that of the United Kingdom. However, Another data shows that if the 11 million white Dutch population is taken alone, the per capita income of these 11 million people is now 1.5 times that of the British per capita. This is all due to the Dutch East India Company. The 500,000 employees of the Dutch East India Company have driven the great development of the Netherlands. If this continues, the unique superpower position of the British Empire will become mediocre. Therefore, I also think that Britain should compete or contain the Netherlands in terms of economy to prevent the other party from threatening Britain's economic dominance. Disraeli's voice was loud and well-reasoned, as if it was read out from a speech manuscript of the House of Commons in London, making people feel that he was trying very hard. But it was true. Whether it was Queen Victoria or Lionel Rothschild, the richest man in Britain, they were all bosses in politics and economy. They were the people who could provide the greatest help to him, his party and his family. How could he not work hard? But what he didn't know was that Lionel Rothschild, who was watching his performance with satisfaction, despised him in his heart. Lionel couldn't help but think of a sentence from his father Nathan, who had passed away 32 years ago. He remembered that his father Nathan proudly said to him after he controlled the right to issue British currency, "I don't care what kind of English puppet is placed on the throne to rule this huge empire on which the sun never sets. Whoever controls the currency supply of the British Empire controls the British Empire. Now, this person is me and the British Rothschild family that I will pass on to you in the future. Remember, my most promising heir, the right to issue currency must be in the hands of our Rothschild family." Looking at Queen Victoria in front of him, Lionel felt cold in his heart. Speaking of which, Her Majesty the Queen was able to ascend to the throne, and he also had a part in it. Now, it seems that Her Majesty, who was able to have a little influence before, has gone too far. Who is Queen Victoria? She has been in control of this country for nearly 30 years. During this period, she has experienced countless social elites. She has to admit that Lionel in front of her does make her feel apprehensive. But it's not just because of him. If it was the Rothschild family of the UK, it would be fine. Although the other party has grown wildly in the financial world of the UK like a tree root, it is still under her nose and within her rule. She can give it to him, but as long as she hardens her heart, she can still deprive him of it. But what makes Queen Victoria very daunting is the entire European Rothschild family behind him. That is the reason why our royal families and governments around the world dare not move around casually. Nathan, the third son of the old Rothschild, was the first to help Count William of Frankfurt transfer 20 times the money by knowing the Battle of Waterloo in advance, and became the largest bondholder of the British government in one fell swoop, obtained the issuance of British government bonds, and controlled the issuance of British currency and the gold price and other crucial decision-making rights. These are naturally no longer mentioned. Except for Nathan, none of his other four brothers, the members of the Rothschild family, are fuel-saving lamps. Lionel's fifth uncle James Rothschild controlled the bond prices of France, forcing Louis VIII to ask for help from him, and finally completely controlled the finance of France. Lionel's great-uncle Amschel Rothschild developed in Frankfurt, the headquarters of the Rothschild family, and controlled the finance of the German Confederation. He had a close relationship with the rise of the Kingdom of Prussia. The rise of William I, Bismarck and the Junker nobles was supported by him. Lionel's fourth uncle, Karl Rothschild, gradually became the financial pillar of the Italian court through the influence of other brothers of the Rothschild family, and his profits spread all over the Italian peninsula. It is said that even King Emmanuel II of Italy had to give him almost equal status. As for his second uncle, Solomon Rothschild, after the end of the Napoleonic Wars, Solomon knocked on the door of Vienna. With the Rothschild family having become a famous family in Europe, and with the spirit of conquering Britain, France, Germany and Italy, Solomon did not directly choose the Habsburgs to talk business, but found a stepping stone, who as Metternich, the Austrian foreign minister who was famous in the European political arena in the 19th century. After defeating Napoleon, the Vienna system led by Metternich maintained the longest period of peace in the 19th century. As Austria gradually declined and was surrounded by powerful enemies, he brought the essence of checks and balances to the extreme. He used the remaining royal orthodoxy of the Habsburgs in Europe to form the Holy Alliance with neighboring Prussia and Tsarist Russia, which stopped France from making a comeback and contained the expansion of the Tsarist Russian Empire. It also formed a mechanism to unite the nationalism and liberalism in Austria, ensuring that the multi-ethnic separatist forces in Austria would not get out of control. The five brothers of the Rothschild family, Nathan Rothschild, helped Metternich with the influence of their brothers in London, England, Paris, Frankfurt, France, and Naples, Italy, and finally opened the door to Austria's financial economy and became the master of the finance and economy of the Austrian Empire. Therefore, now, the currency issuance power of major European industrial countries such as the British Empire, the French Empire, the Kingdom of Prussia, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Kingdom of Italy has fallen under the control of the Rothschild family. In this case, how could Queen Victoria not worry? It is precisely because of the huge power of the Rothschild family that she actually hopes to see the rise of the Netherlands, which is not under the control of the Rothschild family, to break the European financial monopoly of the Rothschild family and let Britain truly get rid of the economic control of the Rothschild family. The reason why Queen Victoria had such a good impression of Viscount Palmerston and Russell was because these two people have always been her best helpers in seeking to eliminate Rothschild's control. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but look at Russell. Chapter 389 Queen Victoria's Strange Thoughts. Buckingham Palace is still playing out the scene where Queen Victoria faces Lionel Rothschild's request to deal with the Dutch East India Company. In the current situation, Crown Prince Edward agrees. Everyone knows that he still can't let go of the hatred of William IV, intercepting Princess Alexandra and becoming the Queen of the Netherlands. As for Prime Minister Disraeli, because of his own party, family and personal interests, he took the lead in expressing his support for the richest man in Britain without the Queen's objection. The purpose is very simple. He hopes that the Tory party can get more support from Rothschild. Russell is in a wait-and-see state, neither agreeing nor opposing. Faced with this situation, Queen Victoria's face is full of embarrassment. If she agrees, Britain will be tightened by the rope around the neck of the financial controlled by the Rothschild family. If she doesn't agree, then the current economy and finance in Britain will take effect immediately. Don't look at the old guy in front of you smiling. He is a man who eats people without spitting bones. After all, the American Civil War was formed under the connection of the Rothschild family. That caused millions of casualties, and the mastermind behind all this found that after the American Civil War, he did not get the benefits he should have gotten. Queen Victoria and Russell had long guessed that the Rothschild family would be dissatisfied, but they did not expect it to happen so soon, and they made their position clear as soon as they arrived. This made it difficult for the originally planned euphemistic delaying tactics to be handled. The Netherlands' anti-Rothschild move gave her hope, but it was a pity that it was only beginning to have a threatening power. The Netherlands, the United States, Tsarist Russia, and other countries alone were not enough to affect the financial monopoly of the Rothschild family in major countries such as Britain, France, Prussia, Italy, and Austria. Now is not the time to deal with the Rothschild family. Thinking of this, she felt a little regretful. It would be great if the British Empire could have complete national debt issuance and currency issuance like the Netherlands. In addition, it seems that Britain needs to establish a company similar to the Dutch East India Company, so that it can balance the influence of Lionel Rothschild and facilitate the return of financial power to the hands of the British royal family. Queen Victoria said to Lionel Rothschild, "In principle, I agree with what Mr. Lionel said that the Dutch East India Company has offended the interests of the British. However, how can the Dutch East India Company be contained? There should be a rule." "Don't worry, Queen," Lionel said with a smile, "I'm ready." Queen Victoria said with a smile, "Ready," which means that Mr. Lionel is really well prepared. Lionel smiled and said, "There's nothing we can do. The Rothschild family always plans before they act. Your Majesty has seen this, hasn't she?" Crown Prince Edward next to him didn't think there was anything wrong with Lionel's words, while Prime Minister Disraeli pretended not to hear them. Foreign Secretary Russell's displeasure flashed away, and his face returned to calmness. Only Queen Victoria looked a little gloomy. She looked at Lionel Rothschild and said calmly, "The British government will not stop the Rothschild family from taking action against the Dutch East India Company, but the British government will not support Rothschild's actions. Of course, I want to remind you that I don't want a large-scale financial crisis or economic crisis to occur in the UK. If it does, I'm sorry, the British royal family and the British government may do something unpleasant. You should know that what I said should be realized. The Rothschild family doesn't want to see this happen either," Lionel Rothschild assured, "and we have prepared a lot of bullets. I think the Dutch East India Company should be either dead or disabled." "Dead or disabled?" Crown Prince Edward showed excitement on his face. The Rothschild family is one of the top families in Europe. It is second only to the royal families of various countries, and because it spans several major European powers, its influence is even wider than that of the royal families of various countries. Because they monopolize the finances of the 5 major countries, Edward, as the British Crown Prince, naturally understands how terrifying the third-generation leader of the Rothschild family is. William IV, I want to see how you Dutch deal with the attack of the Rothschild family, the financial hegemon. As long as the Dutch East India Company, the economic pillar of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, is gone, the economy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands will definitely fall a lot, not to mention being on par with countries like Britain, and maybe it will be beaten back to the level of industrially backward countries like Sweden and Spain. By then, the status of the Netherlands in Europe will definitely plummet, and the International Court of Justice in The Hague, an organization on which the Netherlands relies to exert influence, may change its leadership or dissolve the organization. Queen Victoria looked at her son, Crown Prince Edward, with an expressionless face, looking excited. Her view of Edward became more negative in her heart, and it seemed that some new ideas began to grow in her heart, but they have not yet been finalized. No, the Rothschild family must be suppressed. Perhaps, as Viscount Palmerston said, the British mainland is not suitable for Rothschild, who is going to clear out the Jews. But Europe can. Perhaps Rothschild's actions against the Netherlands and the Kingdom of the Netherlands counterattack can bring unexpected surprises to me and Britain. However, how to connect with the Netherlands and guide the Netherlands to confront Rothschild? This is a difficult problem. Queen Victoria's mind turned many thoughts in an instant. Suddenly, she had an idea. Did William IV ask for Louise for his brother, Frederick, the Crown Prince of Greece? Louise is a smart girl. She can be a middleman. That's it. In the end, Queen Victoria's attitude did not deviate from Lionel's expectations. The royal family and the government agreed that he would use the power of the Rothschild family in Britain to block the Dutch East India Company. At the same time, Berlin, Paris, Vienna and Milan were all playing out the scene that was playing out in London, England. The entire European upper class was stirred up by the actions of the Rothschild family. All those who knew the inside story could not help but look towards the Netherlands. Some of them looked at the Netherlands with mockery, some with sympathy. In short, everyone understood that the Kingdom of the Netherlands was going to suffer this time, and the Dutch East India Company was going to be miserable. No one was optimistic that the Dutch East India Company would win the final victory against the Rothschild Company. Even with the support of the Dutch government, it was just a question of whether it should not lose too badly or not. The Dutch East India Company seemed to be finished. Chapter 390 Who asked the Netherlands to move other people's cheese? The actions of the Rothschild family against the Dutch East India Company shocked the world, and all eyes were immediately directed to Amsterdam, or to be more precise, to the Dutch royal palace. In Berlin, Bismarck, William I and Moltke were sitting opposite each other. Chief of the General Staff Moltke could not help but say, "The Rothschild family is getting more and more excessive. They even dare to ask us to support them in dealing with the Dutch East India Company? To maintain the strength of their Rothschild family while helping them expand their influence in America? To be honest, Your Majesty, Prime Minister, I really wanted to stop you from agreeing to them to use Prussian financial power to deal with the Dutch East India Company." Bismarck glanced at him and said, "You know, the Rothschild family is too strong. Even if it is just Prussia, if we have a dispute with it, the strength of the Rothschild family will be enough to hurt us." Moltke, "I know, but I just feel unwilling. Some time ago, it was the Rothschild family who proposed to us to help the Prussians rise in North America, but in the end, they were the ones who proposed it and ran the fastest. Look at them. It was originally agreed that the Rothschild family would pull out their hidden forces in the American Federation to help Prussia, but in the end, there was nothing. We had to fight alone. Damn the big capitalists. I really can't believe that they really have integrity issues. We should not have supported them earlier. Now that they are strong, they are counterattacking our Kingdom of Prussia." William I laughed and said, "The Rothschild family originally started out in finance in the past few decades, but all countries need financial geniuses to help them. Britain was the first to be conquered, and then the French Empire and our Frankfurt became their headquarters. Under such circumstances, other countries have a steady stream of financial support. If we don't need it, other countries want it. You know, money can do a lot of things. At least weapons and wages can guarantee the combat effectiveness of the soldiers of the Kingdom of Prussia, and the construction of British warships is even faster. Your Majesty is right. We can't easily touch the Rothschild family. Seeing Moltke's displeasure on his face, Bismarck followed and said, but we won't touch them, which doesn't mean we can't help others touch them. William I looked at Bismarck in shock, and Moltke beside him was also very surprised. Moltke had also served as a member of the Northern Parliament of the German Confederation, so his political views would naturally not be too weak. He understood that Bismarck had obviously thought of dealing with the Rothschild family while preserving the current cooperation between the Prussian government and the royal family and the Rothschild family. Bismarck said, the financial support of the Rothschild family is too important for the Prussian kingdom, which is currently in its rising period. It is definitely not worthwhile to make enemies, but seeing the growth, there is a threat to our interests. It is in our best interest to properly restrict and crack down on the Rothschild family. William I, what do you think we should do to be appropriate? If you use too much force, it will become bad, but if you use too little force, it will not be effective, because in dealing with the Rothschild family, you need to master a degree. Bismarck, I think the Rothschild family definitely doesn't want to deal with the Dutch East India Company on the European continent. Moltke asked, why? Bismarck, it's very simple, because the Rothschild family is currently the winner in Europe, which means it belongs to their own territory. Moltke asked curiously, isn't it easier to deal with opponents on your own territory? Bismarck shook his head, of course, there is some truth in this, but on the other hand, if a thief runs into a ceramic shop, after you know it, will you choose to wrestle with him inside and let your fight put your ceramics in danger, or wait until he leaves your house before arresting him? William I and Moltke were stunned. They never thought that Bismarck thought of this. So this is what he meant. Yes, if the Rothschild family fought with the Dutch East India Company on their own territory, the financial hegemony that the Rothschild family had finally established might be threatened. This threat was not only the counterattack of the Dutch East India Company, but also the potential opponents of the Rothschild family, and the governments of various countries had long been eyeing the right to issue currency and bonds. Obviously, with the shrewdness of the Rothschild family, they would not doubt that there must be many people with the same mind as Bismarck and others. Moltke asked, then where do you think the Prime Minister will put the Rothschild family on the battlefield? Bismarck did not answer, but asked back. You should know Moltke was stunned at first, and then he thought of a place. Kingdom of the Netherlands, Amsterdam. As early as after receiving the unusual movement of the Rothschild family, when many people around William IV were anxious, everyone saw that William IV was still as calm as before. Many people thought that this was just William IV's superficial effort to pretend to be calm, but only Queen Alexandra, her bedmate, knew that her husband was indeed so calm. This made her feel proud. This was the right husband, the one who could withstand the pressure from the most powerful financial family in the world. However, now, those people in the Dutch Privy Council should have expressed their concerns to William. She guessed correctly. Now, at the weekly Privy Council in the Netherlands, many people expressed their concerns. Among them, the Dutch Finance Minister Jan van Capel was so excited that his voice was twice as loud as usual. Your Majesty, the Rothschild family, as the most powerful financial force in Europe for nearly half a century, controls the issuance of currencies and bank bonds of several major European countries. Now they are specifically attacking the Dutch East India Company. In this case, we have to be careful and cautious. You know, the United States of America refused the infiltration of the Rothschild family and prevented the Rothschild family from controlling the issuance of currency and launching new bonds in the United States. The Civil War broke out, which shows how terrifying their power is. The difference between Chinese and foreign cultures is still very large. The history of the superpower in the Far East has always been centered around the struggle for political rights. After reading it, you will understand its history, but in foreign history, it is all centered around monetary interests. William IV knew it as early as in the previous life, so after he came to this world, he set about restoring the Dutch East India Company. In fact, he had noticed their actions as early as the United States, but he only wanted to expand the power of the Netherlands in the United States of America, but he never thought that the Rothschild family would react so strongly. Sure enough, when someone else's cheese was moved, they were really unhappy. After the Rothschilds successfully gained huge profits in Europe, they were not satisfied with their ambitions as capitalists, and they immediately reached out to the United States. It was precisely because the Rothschilds, under the promotion of major European powers, almost all governments supported the Southern American alliance established by the Davis government, and civil unrest broke out in the United States. The Rothschilds took the opportunity to mess up the United States, intending to break the balance of power inside. The Rothschilds wanted to take the opportunity to control the United States, a newly emerging economic power across the Atlantic. To this end, they made many preparations, including cultivating forces that followed them, such as supporting the rise of the Rockefeller Consortium and the Morgan Consortium, which they put in a lot of effort. However, how could he compromise when he had a lot of foresight secrets, not to mention that he had already prepared a lot of backups over the years, and the Rothschilds jumped out, which was in line with his expectations. At the moment, he could be frank with the Dutch high-level officials of the Dutch Privy Council. Chapter 391, Becoming a Stepping Stone for the Third Generation of the Luo Family? 1868. The sky over Europe and America was filled with dark clouds because of the order issued by the Rothschild family to the Dutch East India Company. According to the French newspaper Le Figaro, Edmund Rothschild, the heir of the country's financial hegemon James Rothschild, echoed his cousin Lionel Rothschild in London and Paris. He clamored to let the Dutch East India Company learn a lesson and not allow the Dutch East India Company to do anything disrespectful to the Rothschild family. In Le Figaro, he criticized the Dutch East India Company's commercial expansion in the United States of America, talked about the threat of the Dutch East India Company, and incited European countries to resist the Netherlands with the Rothschild family, saying, "The practices of Amsterdam or the United States of America on the other side of the Atlantic and the expansion in South America are very important to the future of European countries." Edmund Rothschild's remarks are not surprising. Le Figaro pointed out that as early as a week ago, although the War of the French Empire in the Far East attracted the attention of many people in Western countries, the frequent actions of the Rothschild family in London, Paris, Vienna, Milan and Frankfurt have attracted more people's attention. The Rothschild family used its financial and capital influence in various countries to mobilize parliamentarians from various countries to launch actions to accuse the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch government in the parliaments of various countries. This time, the financial giant of the French Empire and the heir of the French Rothschild family, James Rothschild, was directly operated. Obviously, perhaps it was an opportunity for his son to exercise. At the same time, perhaps James was avoiding direct confrontation with the Kingdom of the Netherlands and had room to change his final position. However, despite this, it seems that James does not restrict any speech of his son. The Rothschild family has a great influence in Paris, so great that Napoleon III did not want to stop their actions. On May 12, 1868, Edmund Rothschild was invited to give a speech on Dutch policy at the French Parliament in Paris. In his speech on Dutch policy, he openly determined that the Netherlands posed a threat to the French Empire. He believed that the Netherlands had made the most serious long-term challenge to the current European order in recent years. At the same time, in London, Lionel Rothschild, like his cousin Edmund, accepted the invitation of the British Parliament to give a speech in the Parliament in London. In his speech, he declared that the Netherlands was the only medium-sized country that had both the ambition of a great power and the intention to reshape the international order, and had more and more economic, diplomatic, military and technological power to do so. He believed that the British Empire should adopt a strategy of attention, competition and surveillance, in which competition meant that the British Empire should compete with the Netherlands in terms of economy, science and technology, and military technology. In addition, Lionel Rothschild also asked the British Empire's parliamentarians to push the government not to rule out the idea of forcing the Netherlands to comply with European financial and economic rules by exerting pressure. Therefore, Edmund Rothschild's statement in Paris continued Lionel Rothschild's idea. Obviously, in this action against the Dutch East India Company and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, the leader of the Rothschild family is Lionel, the third-generation leader of the Rothschild family. Edmund Rothschild first desperately advocated the threat of the Netherlands on the Belgian issue in the Paris Parliament, and then talked about the difficulties faced by France and the Kingdom of Siam in the Far East because of the role of the Netherlands. He said, even before the Dutch had a huge influence in the United States of America in North America and took down the President of the United States of America, the Netherlands had already challenged the security, economic and strategic value interests of other European countries in the Far East and South America. Edmund Rothschild also brought up the example of King Leopold II of Belgium being sidelined by the Dutch, to prove that the Kingdom of the Netherlands was trying to coerce small European countries to become captives of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. He said, "After all, as everyone knows, the king of the Kingdom of Greece is the father of William IV, the former king of the Netherlands." Then, he began to win over other European countries, saying that he was pleased to see the existing cooperative relations between the Rothschild family and European countries. The Rothschild family is seeking to coordinate actions with various countries in the financial field. As for specific matters, Edmund Rothschild added that at a time when the Dutch East India Company is growing to the point of threatening the interests of various countries in the Far East and America, we in the Rothschild family are all focused on helping the economic development of various countries and countering the threats from the Dutch East India Company. Despite the tough stance, Edmund Rothschild, like Lionel Rothschild in London, declared, "We do not want a conflict with the Netherlands. The Rothschilds and other countries have no intention of engaging in a trade war or a hot war with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and the Rothschilds have no intention of engaging in financial and economic confrontation with the Netherlands." However, he also added, "But we cannot expect Amsterdam to make changes on its own to seriously restrain the expansion of the Dutch East India Company." Edmund Rothschild also repeated his previous remarks when he clamored for the Dutch East India Company to learn a lesson, saying that the Rothschilds have always been wary of the expansion of the Dutch East India Company, especially in the Far East and America, which threatened the interests of the Rothschilds. If the Dutch East India Company continues to damage Rothschild's interests there, it may have to bear the consequences. He said, "Frankly speaking, I think the American Commonwealth will be the focus of European countries for a long time, especially under the current situation where the Dutch ruling party seems difficult to change. I am not sure whether the Netherlands will benefit from it." Whether it is Edmund Rothschild, the prince of the financial world in Paris, France, or Lionel Rothschild, who has inherited the position of British financial hegemony in London, England, as the representatives of the third generation of the Rothschild family, their every move has attracted the attention of Europe. After the death of Mayer Rothschild in 1812, the third son Nathan died in 1836, and the other eldest sons Amschel in Frankfurt, Prussia, the second son Solomon in Vienna, Austria-Hungary, and the fourth son in Naples, Italy, all died in 1855. Now, the only one left in the second generation of the Rothschild family is James Rothschild, the youngest son in Paris, France, and it is rumored that he is in poor health and may not live long. Therefore, many people speculate that the current Rothschild family may be setting up the Dutch East India Company as an opponent, so that the third-generation heirs can use it to exercise their abilities and become the last stepping stone in the growth career of the third-generation heirs of the Rothschild family. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 392 5 Consecutive Questions of Rebuttal. Whether it is the Prince Edmund Rothschild, the financial monopoly giant in our huge French Empire, or Lionel Rothschild, the current largest financial monopoly king in the British Empire, these two outstanding members of the new generation of the Rothschild family are the objects of my admiration. No one will deny that he has been fascinated by the glorious history of the Rothschild family's growth, but no one will deny that he is unwilling to be conquered by the Rothschild family and become their financial and economic slaves. The excuse of blaming the Dutch East India Company has become a common trick of the Rothschild family. The purpose is to see that the Dutch East India Company is not under the financial control of the Rothschild family. It is more and more prosperous. Our development has indeed made the Rothschild family feel threatened. This is correct. After all, the Rothschild family's financial monopoly in various countries has threatened the power of governments and royal families in various countries, while the Dutch East India Company has no similar situation and no such threat. These made the Rothschild family feel uneasy, and this was a precedent that destroyed what Edmund Rothschild called the economic order they established. The Rothschild family was worried that other countries would deliberately follow suit and ignore what they called the European financial rules. If that happened, the Rothschild family would face a catastrophe. On May 13, 1868, Randy Walton, one of the 18 members of the board of directors of the Dutch East India Company and general manager, directly made the above rebuttal in an exclusive interview with the European Times on the matter after the two third-generation heirs of the Rothschild family attacked the Dutch East India Company. Moreover, Randy Walton, who is already 80 years old, asked 5 questions about the rules of the so-called European financial institution order of the Rothschild family, saying, "What is the European financial and economic order? Does it mean that the Rothschild family can do whatever they want in European countries, and other families or individuals in each country can only obey and follow suit? Does it mean that the Rothschild family can use the issuance of currency and bonds to subsidize countries in various countries to fight against the control of the Rothschild family, while other countries can only swallow their anger? Does it mean that the Rothschild family can arbitrarily and illegally unilaterally sanction and restrict the financial development of other families, while others can only accept it? Does it mean that the Rothschild family can attack and discredit the Dutch East India Company without any bottom line, suppress and contain other countries from cultivating their own economic strength, legitimate sovereignty, security, development rights and economic autonomy, and make it difficult for countries to break away from the control of the various branches of the Rothschild family? Does it mean that people with lofty ideals and patriots in various countries need to give up resistance and just accept being slaughtered when facing the oppression of the Rothschild family, and never fight back, or even talk back? Randy Alton said, "This is not a financial rule, let alone an order recognized by all Europeans, but hegemony, bullying, and tyranny, which is the family law gang rule concocted by the Rothschild family. I think that people in Europe and even in the world, no one wants the so-called financial and economic order of the Rothschild family. What they want is that everyone in each country has equal opportunities to develop their own economy, rather than the so-called order that the Rothschild family controls and monopolizes financial power, and they use their monopoly advantages to formulate a more advantageous monopoly for them. I think the Rothschild family is wrong to do this. No one in Europe is stupid, and no government will accept being controlled by a financial family. Everyone wants the economic rights of common domestic security, common development and prosperity to improve their lives, rather than becoming a slave to money controlled by the Rothschild family. It is time for the Rothschild family to reflect on what kind of country the people, governments and even royal families of various countries really want. World peace and development need the Rothschild family to do something for them, not what the Rothschild family needs the world to do for you." Finally, Randy Alton said, "The Dutch East India Company does not need the Rothschild family to teach us what to do and what business partners to interact with, and we will not abide by the rotten rules and broken order set by the Rothschild family. Our Dutch East India Company is a company that has its own development route. We treat the Dutch people as partners, and when we do business in various countries, we abide by the laws of each country. We are willing to share the dividends brought by our development with our trading partners and employees in various countries, and jointly promote the Dutch East India Company's high-quality management experience to the world." The news of Randy Alton's interview was immediately seen by almost the whole of Europe, with a huge influence of the European Times. This is not like an ordinary counterattack article, it is more like a challenge article. Among the 18 directors of the Dutch East India Company, in addition to King William IV of the Kingdom of the Netherlands as the major shareholder holding 50% of the shares, the rest is 25% of the shares of the Amsterdam Trading House, and Randy Alton is the general manager as a director with 5% of the shares. What he said in the interview is obviously the real attitude of the Dutch East India Company, unless the board of directors objects or William IV disagrees. The Dutch East India Company was not afraid of the Rothschild family, and it was still under the sharp rebuttal of 5 questions in a row. Each rebuttal question asked the pain of the Rothschild family, because this was all the low-key Rothschild family had been covering up, but this time it was presented to everyone by Randy Alton one by one in a way of counting, without any trace. Even many civilians had not noticed it before, but now after Randy Alton's reminder, they were shocked to find that the financial power of their country had fallen into a branch of the Rothschild family, not the government or the royal family as they all believed. Among them, ordinary people in the always arrogant British Empire and the French Empire felt the impact the most, and their pride seemed to be washed away by cold water, and their hearts were cold and depressed. It's so uncomfortable, so uncomfortable. How can this be? A foreign family actually controls the currency of our French Empire. Doesn't it mean they can spend whatever they want by printing it? We work so hard all our lives, and they can achieve our dreams by just printing it. How can we become slaves of a foreign family? No, we have to express our dissatisfaction to the Paris government. Yes, I'm not happy with the way Edmund Rothschild speaks. Look at his arrogant look. How can we be willing to recognize such a financial prince? Where does that put His Majesty Napoleon III? So driven by such popular dissatisfaction, The arrogant Gallic rooster took to the streets again. The people of London, who also did not want to accept such a reality, were demonstrating everywhere to express their dissatisfaction, just like Paris. However, compared with the past, this time the British royal family and the British government, as well as the French royal family and the French government, chose to remain silent. After all, in general, the dissatisfaction expressed by these people is not what they think in their hearts. Chapter 393. Once the money rings. French Empire, Paris, Rothschild family. James Rothschild, the only surviving second generation of the Rothschild family, is educating his son. It must be said that the old ones are still the best. There is a reason why Randy Alton, the old man who served William IV, can get the status he has today. James Rothschild looked at his son Edmund and said with a smile, "Learn from him. The Dutch East India Company can become a threat to the Rothschild family. Its controller is naturally not simple." Edmund Rothschild said worriedly, "Father, many people in various countries are protesting against our status now. Will our reputation be damaged because of this?" Looking at the calmness of his father whom he admired since childhood, Edmund couldn't do it. James shook his head and smiled. "Our status is based on absolute strength. You should have seen that even Emperor Napoleon III chose to remain silent." What does this mean? This means that the French top leaders are wary of us, but so what? We are still ourselves. However, it is right to worry. We need to eliminate this negative impact. How about this? Tell your cousin Lionel that it is time to shift our attention. Well, let's move the battlefield to the United States of America. Edmund Rothschild nodded and said, "Yes, father." James said to his son Edmund, "I always do things a little differently. I don't care about controversy. I always appear ambitious in business. You have to know that people's imagination is not always so rich, but in front of rich imagination, they will also get excited. Therefore, appropriate exaggeration and expansion are harmless. People want to believe that something is the biggest, best and most spectacular. You can produce the best products in the world, but if people don't understand it, it will become worthless. Now that the Rothschild family is facing the provocation of Randy Alton, it needs to give people a good opportunity to understand the good product of the Rothschild family. You must remember that in front of the Rothschild family, everything has two sides. The arrival of bad news is often accompanied by the best opportunities. Now, your confrontation with Randy Alton is the Rothschild family's opportunity. Father, will this destroy our family's low-key style? You have to know that nothing will remain unchanged forever. Our Rothschild family has never said that we will always hide behind the scenes. The two most exquisite words in our family heritage are called flexibility. As long as you are united, you will be invincible. The day you brothers separate will be the beginning of the loss of prosperity. In the past, our family squatted and knelt in order to develop, so that we could jump higher. When we are not strong enough, we must never give up patience. But now, we are strong enough, so we don't need to follow the practice started by your grandfather. But you and your cousin Lionel should remember that we cannot threaten the royal families and governments of various countries, because we cannot afford to turn against them. We need to continue to walk with the kings of various countries. On May 17, 1868, in the face of the 5 questions in a row rebuttal by Randy Alton, the general manager of the Dutch East India Company, the Rothschild family did not directly refute it. What many people saw was that in newspapers in many countries, the Rothschild family's various charitable activities and Europe contributions appeared, including major livelihood projects in various countries. Even in Paris and London, many people are the beneficiaries of these livelihood projects. We are committed to making Rothschild a charitable enterprise. Wherever we go, we will put the local people first in our hearts. We will help those in need, even though there may be shortcomings, but that's what we do. Recently, there have been voices in various European countries that are unfavorable to the Rothschild family. I am a little uneasy about this. In order to change the negative views of the people, the Rothschild family will review this. Finally, as the only elder left in the Rothschild family, I have decided that the Rothschild family will invest £500,000 in each of the 5 countries centered on Paris, London, Vienna, Frankfurt and Naples to establish a special charity organization, build orphanages and schools locally, and help local governments reduce their financial burdens. James Rothschild's speech was immediately published by major European newspapers. A total of £2.5 million of huge funds were allocated just like this. My God, although I feel uncomfortable in my heart, I have to admit that the Rothschild family is really rich. Although the national governments of the above 5 places feel a little uncomfortable with the favor, they have to admit that as the beneficiaries, they still choose to accept the temptation of £500,000. It would be a fool not to accept it, not to mention that it was difficult for them to refuse, because the Rothschild family had stated that this was not for the governments of various countries, but for their countries to build orphanages and schools. Even in James Rothschild's speech, he also stated that the money would be used transparently, which instantly won the favor of people in Paris and London. After all, in general, £500,000 can indeed sell a lot of dignity for poor people, although many people will deny it. Once money rings, bad words stop abruptly. William Ivey never thought that Randy Alton's rebuttal would achieve much success, nor did he think that the Rothschild family would suffer a great loss. The above Rothschild family motto is one of the best classic sentences in later generations. If it was so easy to deal with, it would not be the legendary family that he knew existed until the 21st century. I remember that in the 21st century, many people were still speculating how much wealth this family had hidden and arguing endlessly, but no one knew that even the notoriously strict American Tax Bureau would find it difficult to find out. After all, this requires the cooperation of countries around the world. Facing such a family that has gained hegemony in the world economic history for 200 years, William Ivey would not think that the other party was easy to deal with from the beginning. If it is so easy to deal with, it is not the Rothschild family. Randy Alton sat at the bottom. Hearing this, he immediately said, "Your Majesty, now the Rothschild family is obviously trying to stop the damage to its image. Should we take advantage of the victory and continue to expose? One of Randy Alton's business philosophies is to take advantage of your illness to kill you." William Ivey shook his head and said, "The Rothschilds are a business family. To deal with them, you can't just use political means. The most effective way is to do business with strength, and means is the greatest strength. In my opinion, the best explanation of means may be that you have something that others want but don't have. As for the Dutch East India Company, it seems that it is obvious that Rothschild has taken a fancy to something in it. Since you have set your sights on the American side, let our compatriots in the American side take the initiative to suppress the other party." Randy Orton agreed with this. They couldn't wait until the Rothschilds were ready to suppress before counterattacking. Sometimes, it would be more advantageous to counterattack than to take the initiative. Chapter 394 North American Suppression. The experience of successfully obtaining huge profits in Europe cannot satisfy the ambitions of capitalists. The Rothschild family has actually already extended its hands to the United States of America. Harvard University President Charles Eliot once again stood at the forefront of the decryption of Lincoln's murder in the newspapers of the United States of America, which was even more attractive than the police news. Let's restore the hypothesis that President Lincoln was assassinated. On the evening of Friday, April 24, 1868, the fifth night after winning the presidential impeachment case, President Lincoln came to the Ford Theater in Washington with great interest to watch a performance. At 10:15 p.m., the murderer sneaked into the box and shot Lincoln in the head with a gun from less than 2 feet behind Lincoln. A great president died. After investigation, it was found that the murderer was a well-known actor who fled in a hurry after assassinating Lincoln. It is said that the murderer was shot dead on April 26 while fleeing. Many letters written in code were found in the murderer's carriage. In addition to confirming that he was of Prussian descent, these coded letters and some personal belongings of the Jew Benjamin. This Jew was called Benjamin. His original identity was the personal financial advisor of August Belmont, the financier of the King of Fifth Avenue. August was a well-known financial power in the United States. August Belmont was the agent of the Frankfurt Rothschild family bank and a relative of the family. Benjamin had been fired by August before, but it was said that this financial advisor had close contacts with major European bankers. After the assassination, Benjamin fled to England. After the interview, President Charles Eliot chose to stop at this point, just like most dramas, and said righteously, "The assassination is widely believed to be a large-scale conspiracy. The participants in the conspiracy may be members of Lincoln's cabinet, bankers in New York and Philadelphia, or government officials in the South, and even multinational bankers and capitalists on the other side of the Atlantic." However, despite this, when Charles Eliot, the most influential academic leader in the United States of America at Harvard University, announced such a big speculation, everyone became more interested in the conspiracy theory behind Lincoln's assassination. and many insiders understood that it was Charles Eliot's position that destined the Rothschild family and the Dutch East India Company to fight in Europe. It is possible that it will be staged in North America. At least, judging from the guiding topic of the current Harvard University president, the future trend is like this. Sure enough, not long after, many Dutch newspapers began to launch various versions simultaneously, and the goal was pointed in one direction. The New York Times also reported on the rumors, saying that the killer was not killed but was let go, and the body buried later was his accomplice in order to cover up the truth. It sounds like a conspiracy theory at first, but as the secret letters that were captured were decrypted, many people found that the truth was highly consistent with these rumors. The Chicago Times even reported that another Golden Circle Knight logo was found in the letter. The title on it is "What is the relationship between the Golden Circle Knight and the financial forces in New York? How many people in the Lincoln government were involved in the conspiracy to assassinate Lincoln?" Lincoln's assassination was surprisingly similar to the assassination of many European financiers. Is this a coincidence? What is the purpose? The Chicago Times also interviewed the famous Dutch political commentator Herman van Perron for this. Van Perron's perspective on things is very surprising. He even extended these issues to the beginning of the American War of Independence. He said that many people believe that the main reason for the American Civil War was the abolition of slavery. In fact, the abolition of slavery was only the fuse, not the main cause. Someone took advantage of this contradiction between the North and the South to ferment and promote the Civil War. He said that who likes war the most is, of course, the bankers. Once a war breaks out, the consumption of the national treasury is huge. At this time, the country has to turn to the bankers for help and borrow money from the bankers. The bankers can smoothly control the issuance of a country's national debt and earn huge profits. Herman van Perron also emphasized that at this time, all currencies must be supported by metals such as gold and silver. No credit currency can support it. Therefore, bankers control the largest metal currency. Herman van Perron told the Chicago Times that in fact, as early as 1855, a famous banker in Paris, France, pointed out that Solomon Rothschild, the second of the 5 brothers of the Rothschild family, came to the United States from Paris as a tourist and organized the layout of the Rothschild family here. I think that in New York, many people will suspect that he is the general coordinator of all plans, and publicly stated that he will strongly support the South in finance and try his best to help the South gain recognition from European powers. Therefore, it can be determined that the Rothschild family is not necessarily a direct participant, but it is very certain that they must be the promoters behind the scenes. By analogy, the Lincoln government's change in the mode of issuing war bonds has promoted the core interests of the Rothschild family. Assassination seems to have become a possible means for the family to use. Of course, since there is no evidence, everything is conjecture, and there is no definite suspicion. Although Herman van Perron, a well-known European current affairs commentator, and President Charles Eliot, have no real evidence to prove that the Rothschild family participated in the Lincoln assassination, the effect of pointing the finger at them was quickly apparent. Many people on the streets of New York opposed the Rothschild family's settlement in North America. Charles Eliot's identity as the president of Harvard attracted a lot of resonance in the education sector. Many teachers and students in the 7 states of New England took to the streets to ask the government not to let what happened in European countries happen in the United States of America. As the trend intensified, this wave hit the entire southern and western United States of America. This time, in addition to the New York Post, Dutch, the New York Times, Dutch, and the Chicago Times, Dutch, even the German and Irish newspapers, the San Francisco Times, German, the Washington Post, Irish, and the Washington Times, Danish, joined the ranks of those who opposed the Rothschild family with tinted glasses and scrutiny. It seems that at this moment, the Rothschild family has become a street rat that everyone shouts and beats in the United States of America and North America, and it is in a mess. It seems that the suppression is successful, but this is just a manifestation. In secret, the Rothschild family is already planning a counterattack. Moreover, the targets of the counterattack were the major Dutch conglomerates. Chapter 395 The Establishment of Dutch Values. What does the Kingdom of the Netherlands want to do in the near future? What I can tell you now is that the Netherlands has been committed to doing the following things since I inherited the throne. First, to control the global financial system. Second, to control governments of various countries with financial systems and fiscal means. Third, to control entertainment and mass newspaper media with capital means. Fourth, to establish an intelligence system that controls the world. Fifth, to control universities and education systems with foundations. Sixth, to control medical insurance funds and control global health and medical systems with foundations. Seventh, to control and monopolize global resources and food markets with financial means. The ultimate goal of the Kingdom of the Netherlands is to break the sovereignty system of other countries, dismantle European and American countries into several small countries, and combine the world into a multinational region controlled by the Netherlands, similar to the member states of several major organizations such as the Hague International Court of Justice that we have established now, to establish the future European Union community and the future American Union community in the Americas, and to establish a Dutch-led Pacific community in the Indian Ocean and Pacific regions. In the end, the Netherlands will establish a unified centralized government in the world that is beneficial to the Netherlands and establish a new global order, just like the current American Federation. Of course, this is a long-term goal, which may take more than 10 years, or even decades or hundreds of years to complete, but it is a goal. William Ivey said, "At present, the biggest enemy that blocks us from achieving our goals, apart from the governments and royal families of European countries, is the Rothschild family." Of course, for us, the Rothschild family is also the easiest to deal with. Therefore, I chose to use the other party as our target of attack this time. As William Ivey's long-term goal was announced in the Privy Council for the first time, it shocked the members of the Dutch Royal Privy Council present, even Prime Minister Thorbecke. No one would have thought that William Ivey would have such great ambitions to control the evolution of Europe and even the rest of the world, and even propose to split the countries into several small countries, and then the Netherlands would control Europe from them. Imagine the scene of Paris or Prussia, Britain, Austria-Hungary, Tsarist Russia, etc. being divided into several countries. It's suffocating to think about it. Thorbecke couldn't help asking William Ivey, "Your Majesty, what are our weapons?" The others looked at him with doubts. National autonomy and democratic values. Seeing that they were puzzled, William Ivey said, "The Netherlands establishes its own values. We can use the rise of humanism in the 14th century, the Renaissance movement, which advocated human rationality, individual liberation, and opposed religious divinity, restraints, and class shackles. We can also quote the Enlightenment movement in the 17th and 18th centuries, which was based on the theory of natural law and social contract. From Hobbes's theory of natural rights, Spinoza's rational freedom, Locke's democratic equality ideas, to Montesquieu, Voltaire, Lejeune, Diderot and other ideas about natural human rights, natural equality, born free, social contract, and sovereignty shared by the people, freedom, democracy, equality, and human rights will become the Netherlands' future external slogan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands' theoretical weapon against other countries. I believe that with it, the Netherlands will gradually promote development in all parts of the world, including Europe, and become the holy land of capitalist core values that people most yearn for. It is also the tool we rely on to conquer people all over the world. It must be said that what William Ivey said is exactly this set of new interventionist weapons that the entire Western countries will use to interfere in the internal affairs of countries around the world in the future. There is a reason for its existence. Even the 21st century is so easy to fool people in various countries, not to mention that the current feudal society is full of the 19th century. William Ivey believes that as long as the Dutch set is moved out, the impact on countries around the world will be absolutely huge. The reason why the United States of America has become the most desirable place for immigrants from all over the world in later generations is that the United States attracts people with the above set of values. The same is true for the whole of Western Europe. At present, countries have not realized the extraordinary attraction of these values to the bottom of society, or in other words, countries have never thought that there will be a country that can rely on these things to empty their national talents and eventually create the superpower of the United States. Other countries have been weakened to the point of becoming a first-class power. Among them, major European countries such as Britain, France, and Germany are the objects of being sucked dry. Today, the world has changed. The United States has been divided into two. Both its war potential and industrial potential have declined. Although its appeal is still very strong, it is far inferior to the economic recovery brought about by the end of the Civil War of more than 4 years in the previous life, because it has just experienced a 7-year civil war. Therefore, America, which has become Europe's future paradise, seems to be even bleaker. On the contrary, Due to the Netherlands' vigorous development, the Netherlands has now migrated 6 million Dutch people to the Australian continent. It is a real paradise surrounded by the sea. In addition, the Dutch Far East government has built roads and bridges and increased urban construction. Cities such as Sydney and Melbourne are comparable to the Dutch capital Amsterdam in scale, with a population of more than 500,000, and even more than 900,000. With a population of 1 million, Sydney's population base is comparable to that of major European cities such as London, Paris, Vienna, and Berlin, and has built the first international metropolitan city under the jurisdiction of the Netherlands. The bustling construction boom there was frequently reported in newspapers across Europe, successfully attracting the attention of many people in Europe. According to William IV, in the past 7 years, the number of European immigrants to the Australian continent has exceeded 300,000. Among them, the population of countries such as Britain, France and Prussia is not large, but there are many small countries such as Sweden and Denmark. Obviously, the opportunities there have become the purpose of their immigration. Ladies and gentlemen, we may have advantages on a material basis, but the advantages are limited. After all, in comparison, the wealth of the Rothschild family is difficult to match even for the British royal family. In this case, it is difficult for us to fight against them. To defeat the other side, we must start from other places. The Netherlands is an independent country, but the Rothschild family is not. It can only be regarded as a folk group. Use your own strengths to face the other side's weaknesses, recognize their strengths and weaknesses, and our advantages, and then we can start. Know others and know yourself. Legislation is our strength. The Dutch government and parliament can issue new administrative policies anytime and anywhere, which is also our strength. On the contrary, the other party needs to push on the governments of various countries and lobby on the legislative bodies of various countries. This requires a lot of money and time, and the final result is often difficult to achieve what they want. This is our biggest advantage between us at present. As William IV explained, everyone couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Yes, the Netherlands is a separate kingdom. Although the multinational family seems to have a huge influence, the Rothschild family is restricted and can hardly get rid of the fear of various countries. This makes the Rothschild family timid and unable to exert themselves. Often, a quarter of an hour can change the ownership of victory on the battlefield. The business world is like a battlefield, and time is even more urgent. With everyone's recognition, the Dutch values took shape, and finally began to become the vanguard of the Netherlands' influence on the world in the next few hundred years, and became the biggest promoter of the evolution and replacement of governments in various countries in the world. This is a later story. Chapter 396 is the work of the Morgan family. 1868, Thomas A. Hendricks, a nationalist senator and Democratic Senate Minority Whip, said in an interview that the industrial technology of the Kingdom of the Netherlands was ahead of that of the United States, and called on the United States to ensure that the United States maintained its advantage in the competition with the Netherlands. The Washington Society of the United States reported an exclusive interview with Senator Thomas A. Hendricks on May 20, local time, with the title Daily. The report said that Thomas A. Hendricks isolated the United States of America's bid to strengthen strategic infrastructure in Latin America together with the Netherlands. He compared the United States of America to the Kingdom of the Netherlands in this regard and made it clear that he does not think that the Netherlands' investment in Latin America and the United States of America is a threat. Washington Society, Senator Thomas A. Hendricks said that the Netherlands' technological innovation and industry is also far ahead of the United States of America, and called on the United States of America to pay attention to improving the United States of America's own industrial technological innovation to ensure that it does not lag behind others. The newspaper said that this was the reason for its interview with Senator Thomas A. Hendricks on the occasion of the second anniversary of Indiana's formal accession to the United States of America. The beginning of this interview manuscript stated that in response to the question of whether the influence of the Netherlands in the Americas is worrying, Thomas gave more than a long answer. He said that he did not think that the Netherlands' strategic trade and infrastructure investment throughout the Americas was a threat. I have said that Latin America as a whole has commercial and trade relations with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, just like the trade relations between the United States of America and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. We have seen Dutch companies go to Latin America to bid for infrastructure and industrial investment. They have won some bids and lost some. Many people asked me questions like, "Do you think this is a threat?" "I don't think it is a threat," Thomas said. He continued, I have always called on our country to actively participate in the strategic infrastructure bidding in Latin America, because we are the United States of America and the most powerful member state in the Americas. But now I find that I have not seen many American companies participating in the past few years. I think they must participate, and they must participate more. Not only Latin America, but also Canada in North America and the United States of America in the South, because these countries and regions are transparent and open in the bidding, and these countries and regions are happy to see that more American companies join these projects to balance the monopoly of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So, do I think it is a negative thing for the Netherlands to invest in Latin American infrastructure and industry? No, I don't believe it, because it's all open bidding. Obviously, another major issue we face is how to maintain the industrial technology of the United States and how to safely safeguard the national interests of the United States. Thomas said. The report continued that Thomas also believed that although industrial innovation is an accelerator for the United States to accelerate economic recovery, the development and expansion of any industrial technology innovation must be implemented under the planning and assistance of the government departments of the United States. I think we all have to be clear that we want to expand the development and construction of industrial innovation and production technology in the United States, because it is obviously an accelerator for the United States to rise to a comprehensive strength comparable to that of European powers, but we must find a plan that can ensure the help of government departments, so that American companies can wholeheartedly catch up with or even surpass European companies, and ensure that in all operations, our companies are not acquired by Dutch and British companies, or other purposes that reduce the strength of the United States. Thomas said, so I think this discussion is not only in the United States, but also a topic of discussion on both sides of the Atlantic. Obviously, if we want to promote domestic employment and increase the development of the United States, we must support local companies more. If not, our companies will face foreign investment. It will be difficult to form an effective resistance to invasion capabilities. In addition, Senator Thomas A. Hendricks also expressed his views on security cooperation, parliamentary relations, and other issues between the United States and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Senator Thomas A. Hendricks's statement puzzled many people. Obviously he is attacking the Dutch policy in America, and although he says that the Netherlands is not a threat, he is actually leading people into a ditch. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of this? In the White House, Andrew Johnson, who has succeeded President Lincoln, is summoning his team to discuss the public opinion brought by Senator Thomas A. Hendricks. Although the spread in the United States is not very strong at present, after all, the Washington Society is only one of the top 10 newspapers in the United States. The readership is less than 100,000. However, it has brought a shock to the political arena, which is not small at all. Obviously, Thomas A. Hendricks's goal should not be to target the general public, but the upper class of the United States. After Seward was fired by Lincoln, the position of Secretary of State, which had been hanging for a long time, was appointed by President Andrews to take over the position of Secretary of State of the United States. Randy Bosch is very energetic, and President Andrew Johnson thinks he is even more useful. Andrew Johnson's cheeks were covered with beard, and he looked very heroic. Of course, those who knew him knew that under this appearance, there was a coldness similar to that of a venomous snake. Especially as an insider, Randy Bosch knew better than most people what happened to Lincoln. Andrew Johnson frowned and wondered. As the whip of the Democratic Party in the Senate, Thomas A. Hendricks used to be very low-key and was good at building relationships. He was a well-known peacemaker in the Democratic Party. It was because of this that he became the second in command of the Democratic Party in the Senate in just a few years. The third in command of the entire Democratic Party. He's a rising star of the Democratic Party who is less than 50 years old. I don't believe that his political awareness is so poor. I can't see the strength of the Dutch. If that were the case, Douglas, the leader of the Democratic Senate, the number one figure of the party, and Lincoln's opponent, would have taken him down long ago. Randy Bosch also said in confusion, "That's right, this is also what I don't understand." Both of them were puzzled. "President, this is an encrypted letter from Secretary of the Interior Elihu B. Washburn. Is it him?" Randy Bosch was puzzled. Why would he write to the president at this time? But seeing the anxious expression on Andrew Johnson's face, it looked like he had been waiting for a long time. Did President Andrew know that there would be a letter? However, Washburn is the current leader of the Irish people. Suddenly, he thought of something and looked at President Andrew with wide eyes. Andrew didn't let him wait for long. He looked at Secretary Bleich in surprise and said, "It's the work of the Morgan family." Chapter 397, The Great Triangle of Britain, France and Italy. 1868, King Emmanuel II of the Kingdom of Italy officially visited Paris, France and London, the United Kingdom, to mediate between the British Empire and the French Empire. While maintaining superficial friendly relations with Napoleon III, he also showed mutual respect with Queen Victoria during this visit. What ambitions did King Emmanuel II have? Faced with such a situation, William IV was somewhat confused by King Emmanuel II's actions at this time. There is no fundamental contradiction between the Kingdom of Italy and the French Empire. Both sides have been Catholic countries in history, and there are few border conflicts. The geopolitics of the British Empire is to contain any country in Eurasia that may challenge the British Empire's maritime hegemony. The French Empire actually helped Italy attract a lot of firepower from the British Empire, because the British Empire would compete with France in the Mediterranean, intending to control the import and export of the entire Mediterranean with Egypt in the east and Gibraltar in the west as bases, and even to get involved in the central Mediterranean. So on the issue of the Mediterranean, the two countries actually have no fundamental conflict of interests. After all, the common opponent is the existence of the British Empire. Both countries are Catholic countries, which are different from the Protestantism in Britain. Therefore, both countries respect the Roman Catholic Church very much. On the contrary, the British Empire is very wary of this. The religious interests of the two countries have many common interests. If Italy can get closer to the French Empire, or even form an alliance, it will be beneficial to both sides. France and Italy are complementary in many aspects, such as Italy's location and population, France's advanced agriculture and industrial technology that is not much behind Britain, and the naval cooperation between the two countries is very intimidating to the Mediterranean to fight against British hegemony. The alliance between the two countries will change Italy's industrial progress and will also change the current situation in Europe. At the same time, there were rumors that the two countries were going to form a new Roman alliance, but no officials from the two countries came out to deny it. This makes people know that this is a signal that the two countries are trying to get closer, and it may also be a signal that the two countries are deliberately testing other countries. In a sense, the British Empire, the French Empire, and Italy are also a big triangle relationship, and Italy is the relatively weak side of the triangle. Therefore, Italy's policy of catering to both sides is the best solution from a geopolitical strategy perspective. The French Empire's support for Venice made Italy very satisfied. However, after Italy defeated Austria, France asked for territory, and Italy was very dissatisfied after it was given. Therefore, the relationship between the two countries turned from good to bad. So during Emmanuel II's recent visit to Paris, Napoleon III did not mention the territorial claim, but extended the sovereignty of Venice again and supported Italy. At the same time, Napoleon III said that he would never interfere in Italy's internal affairs. Regarding Emmanuel II's trip to Britain and France, the European Times interviewed William IV. The stability of the Mediterranean is inseparable from the friendly relations between the British Empire, the French Empire and the Kingdom of Italy. European Times, Emmanuel II's visit to Paris is the highlight of this visit. Emmanuel II's visit is the first visit to the French Empire since the two countries jointly fought against the Austrian Empire in the Venice dispute in 1859. During this visit, Emmanuel II and Napoleon III reviewed the war soldiers who participated in the war to help Italy resist the Austrians. Emmanuel II also issued medals to some people, which made the Parisians very happy. We noticed that before the visit, both countries kept a low profile on the visit. So how do you interpret it? Do you think the conditions for the warming of relations between Italy and France are ripe? William IV, this question is worth thinking about. Italy is a country with a very prominent position. Everyone knows that it is the Roman Catholic Church, so it is born with the status of a great power. Therefore, we treat Emmanuel II as a king of a great power. From a geopolitical point of view, Italy and France are both in the north-central Mediterranean of the European continent and are two neighboring powerful European countries. The population of Italy and France is 35 million and 24 million respectively, which adds up to nearly 60 million, comparable to the population of the Russian Empire. The industries of the two countries are naturally far from comparable to the traditional agricultural country of the Russian Empire. Therefore, the relationship between Italy and France can never be underestimated, Because it is related to the fate of nearly 1/3 of the population of Europe, right? Although Italy has joined the International Court of Justice in The Hague and has built a northern and southern encirclement of the French Empire in terms of geography, it also has its own independent tradition and is not constrained. Italy joined this organization, to some extent, hoping to play the role of a leader in the European pattern. The Netherlands knows this, and Britain and France also know Italy's mentality, so London and Paris both tacitly accept Italy's role as a great power, and both agree that this visit to the two countries as a great power should be a happy thing for the Italian government. But Italy also sees a problem, that is, whether the promises of Britain and France are credible. I think there is a touchstone to judge whether the promises of various countries can be trusted, that is, when the countries deal with internal problems, whether foreign countries intervene and respect your national interests. William IV then said that Italy's location and strategic significance are very important, so all major powers will make it a priority strategic target to win over Italy. Therefore, it can be predicted that Italy will be a hotspot for a period of time in the future. However, if Italy does not make good use of this rare opportunity, it will lose the opportunity for development history, and many people will regret it in the future. European Times, what role can the Netherlands play in it? What can the Netherlands gain and lose from it? William IV, we play a promoting role. Everyone knows that the rise of the Netherlands is almost synchronized with Italy. Both were around 1860. The Netherlands was mainly ahead in economy, while Italy was ahead in military and politics. Both countries rose only after being recognized by various countries. But the way the Netherlands rose was different. We chose not to be in Europe, but to focus on the Far East. We built another nest there, our new home. Therefore, we are far away from the European continent, which is more stable and safer. Italy, on the other hand, is in Europe and the African continent. Victor Emmanuel II placed his bets on his side, so the two countries took different paths in this regard. The result is still unknown, and I will not answer it. As for what the Netherlands lost and gained? Chapter 398. What do you think of Italy? William IV said to the European Times, what the Netherlands might lose and gain? Frankly speaking, the Netherlands may have lost more diplomatic leverage. Italy's position, obviously from the perspective of a member of the International Court of Justice in The Hague, is slightly more neutral, which is conducive to the Netherlands and Italy's position of restraining France in the north and south. Obviously, with the ice-breaking trip of Emmanuel II to France, a gap has appeared. For this reason, the Netherlands needs to make some adjustments. As for how to adjust, that is the scope of work of the Dutch diplomatic department. As for what the Netherlands has gained? Everything has two sides. Italy's visit to the French Empire actually benefited the Netherlands. Why? Because many people can find that the tension in the English Channel has decreased, and the Netherlands will avoid choosing sides in the north. You must know that these are the two most powerful countries in Europe. Although the Netherlands and the French Empire have different opinions on the Far East, it does not prevent the two countries from cooperating on European issues. As everyone knows, the Netherlands and the French Empire have similar positions on the Belgian issue. European Times, what do you think of Italy? Italy is a rising country. Rising and conservative countries have always had disputes over territory and sphere of influence since ancient times, just like the Austrian Empire in Italy. Although the two countries almost belonged to the League at the beginning, they hated each other. In the end, because of the Venice issue and the determination of Emmanuel II to rise, the Austrian Empire's goal of maintaining the status quo of the two countries was difficult to sustain. In the end, the two countries were supported by the French Empire behind the scenes, which led to a short-term war. In the end, Italy and the French Empire won, and Austria was forced to become Venice and other places that were Italian territory. From then on, Austria lost its hegemony in the central Mediterranean. Of course, there were intermittent border conflicts later, but the real conflict areas on the border between Italy and Austria still accounted for only a very small part. However, now that Austria and Prussia have been defeated, the former Austrian Empire has become the current Austro-Hungarian Empire. The two countries seem to have chosen peace and border disputes, which is rare. After some conflicts, everyone now understands where their respective control lines are, and they do not cross their own control lines. I think this is also a controllable situation before the ultimate solution to this problem. As long as the conflict does not deteriorate, everyone knows where the control line is. In the past, the borderline may not be very clear, and the border soldiers of the two countries are inevitably confused. These are understandable. Of course, if the Italian and Austro-Hungarian soldiers take the initiative to provoke, it is a problem that they need to control themselves. European Times: what kind of person do you think King Emmanuel II of Italy is? King Emmanuel II of Italy is also a political strongman. He also wants to play the role of Napoleon III or Alexander II. However, sometimes, he is more like King William I of Prussia, introverted and low-key, but no one looks down on him. Under his command, there have been European diplomatic strategists like Cavour, and there have been ministers of revival like Marco Manghetti and La Marmora. It is really like God's help, which has put Italy's development on the right track. He and William I actually have a tacit understanding. The relationship between Prussia and Italy is very special. We may talk about it later. I think the mutual approach between Italy and the French Empire is very, very important to the problems of the whole Europe. The British talk about the power struggle in the Mediterranean, but we don't say that. There is no fundamental conflict between Italy and the French Empire. Britain's geopolitical strategy is to contain any country on the European continent that may challenge the British Empire's maritime hegemony. Its strategy is offshore balance. Offshore balance means that although it is not on the European continent, it wants to destroy the relationship between these countries on the European continent, especially the relationship between the major powers, and alienate them, especially the neighboring relationship between the French Empire, the biggest threat to Britain's border, and other European countries. Italy also has very far-sighted strategists. The late Prime Minister Cavour, who died as Prime Minister in 1861 and was the most trusted minister of Emmanuel II, is the most famous one. He believes that the French Empire standing in front of Italy actually helped Italy attract a lot of firepower from the British Empire. If the French Empire is suppressed by the British Empire, then there will be no one standing in front of Italy, and it will have to accept all the firepower launched by the British Empire, which will be a huge shock to Italy. Now that the French Empire is standing in front, Italy can develop its economy quietly, which he thinks is also good. I think this concept is strategically far-sighted. In fact, the British Empire does not care whether you are a Protestant or Catholic country, or whether you have been friendly to the British Empire in history. Whether it is the Russian Empire in the Baltic Sea, the Middle East and the Far East, or the French Empire in the Mediterranean and the English Channel, or Prussia in the North Atlantic, as long as it challenges its maritime hegemony, it must eliminate your threats. So on this issue, I think that both the Netherlands and Italy are Renaissance countries, and both sides have a common position. I make a bold judgment that I think the relationship between the Netherlands and Italy can continue to be maintained with comprehensive strategic mutual support, despite the easing of relations between the French Empire and Italy. European Times: so just now we saw that this visit, as you mentioned just now, happened to be in the triangular relationship between Italy, France and Britain, and Italy seemed to play the role of a lubricant. Especially under the poor relationship between Britain and France, and the background that the French Empire invaded the Kingdom of Siam in the Far East, which led to France's poor relations with neighboring countries, we noticed that the French Empire's invasion of the Kingdom of Siam was unpopular in Europe. In fact, when Italy and the Netherlands criticized the French Empire for its unfriendly behavior, both countries were dismissive and showed a certain degree of consistency. For example, they both imposed economic sanctions on the French Empire within the framework of the International Hague Court. How do you interpret the similar behavior of the Netherlands and Italy? Is this a coincidence? William IV: this is definitely not a coincidence. The National Hague Court organization has some common interests. According to my own observation, the attitudes of Spain, Portugal, and even Switzerland and Belgium on this issue are highly consistent and in line with those of the Netherlands and Italy. This is not a coincidence. These neighboring countries seem to have taken a common position under the sense of crisis about the French Empire's behavior. This is the first reason. Secondly, the relationship between Italy and the French Empire is very special. More than 40% of Italy's military equipment imports come from the French Empire. Among the main sources of Italy's arms trade, the first is the French Empire, the second is the British Empire, and the third is the Netherlands. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 399, Italy is different from the Ottoman Empire? Although it has always said that it wants to diversify its sources of arms, and wants to expand the share of Dutch weapons and British weapons, and even Prussia has a part, but the best equipment of those countries has not been given to Italy. Of course, the most important thing is that Italy itself wants to use arms business to ease the relationship with the French Empire. For example, the steam battleships that Italy has always wanted to buy from the French Empire, the kind of battleships that do not need sails to operate. Currently, only Britain, France and the Netherlands have the technology and manufacturing capabilities for such battleships in the world. Even the United States, which has an equally advanced shipbuilding industry, can only make some small battleships and steam merchant ships. Prussia wants to buy, but Britain, France and the Netherlands have no intention of selling Prussia. Some time ago, it was said that Prime Minister Bismarck asked Prussia to explore technology on its own, build its own battleship manufacturing system, and break the monopoly of Britain, France and the Netherlands. It relies on steam power to come and go freely, and no longer needs to look at the wind direction in the sky to walk on the sea. The added combat power is not a little bit. Think about it, this is very important for Italy to ensure the security of the three countries, especially considering the current poor relationship with the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the strategic security issues of the British Empire and France in the Mediterranean. Therefore, I think the relationship between Italy and France is very important to Italy. At the same time, Italy and the French Empire have common interests in Africa. One occupies a large area of colonies in the east and the other in the west. I checked and found that the two countries developed southward in East Africa and West Africa respectively, with Libya and Algeria as the boundary. It can be said that they have a tacit understanding to operate their respective scopes. This is something that some allies rarely have. The logic behind this is that the French Empire needs to face the pressure from the west of the British Empire, and at the same time, the relationship with the Netherlands and Prussia in the north is not very close. Does France still need to deploy a large number of troops to the east to guard against Italy? If so, how can the security interests of the French Empire be maintained? Therefore, the French Empire knew that the competitive relationship with Britain could not be changed, and there were contradictions with the Netherlands and Prussia in the short term that were difficult to resolve. Easing the relationship between Italy and France in the east became the easiest and most manipulative action for Napoleon III. Italy wants both the advanced weapons of the French Empire and favorable strategic interests, while the French Empire needs to ease relations, so in the end, the ice-breaking trip between the two countries can be regarded as a natural cooperation. Moreover, in the case that many European countries have cut off or reduced their demand for economic and industrial products of the French Empire, if the blockade can be broken and the huge Italian market can be accepted, it will be a huge breakthrough in the current deadlock for the French Empire. This is very important for the French Empire. In this regard, the most suitable countries for the French Empire are Italy and Spain. At present, Spain seems to be more wary of France than Italy. Thirdly, I think Emmanuel II seems to like William I and Napoleon III very much in terms of personality, because he is also a strong man. Maybe the new heroes appreciate each other. These factors are actually included. European Times, Your Majesty, as you mentioned earlier, Italy is also a member of the International Hague Court, who wants to dominate or is a very important member. In this storm of sanctions against the French Empire, Italy's performance of following the Netherlands and sanctioning France did make the French Empire somewhat dissatisfied, but Italy's close relationship with the French Empire made Britain dissatisfied. What do you think of Italy's attitude? What do you think will be the impact on the relationship between Italy and the British Empire? William IV, Franz Joseph I of the Austro-Hungarian Empire made a statement yesterday. You can read the relevant report in the Austrian Crown this morning. His Majesty Franz Joseph I even used the English word shaky, which can be directly understood in our Dutch dialect as unreliable and swaying. Franz Joseph I sarcastically named Italy the opponent, which shows that Franz Joseph I was dissatisfied with Italy. On the other hand, every time Italy visited Britain and France, it would ask the kings and senior government officials of the two countries to agree that Venice belonged to Italy, which obviously angered Franz Joseph I. Many people thought that the sarcasm at this time was expected. European Times, what do you think the change in the relationship between Italy, France and Britain means to the Netherlands? William IV, I think it's good. If Italy can really follow the old policy of playing both sides, it means that Italy has made a very smart strategic choice, because in a sense, Italy, Britain and France are also a big triangle relationship, just like the previous Tsarist Russia, Prussia and Austria in Central and Eastern Europe. Or it is the largest triangle in Europe at present, Britain, France and Russia. Or the European religious triangle, Protestant Catholic, Orthodox. These iron triangles are very backup. The British Empire and the French Empire are stronger than Italy. It is the relatively weaker side in the Mediterranean triangle. So at this time, Italy adopted a policy of pleasing both sides. I think this is the best strategy in terms of geopolitical strategy. European Times, is the Kingdom of Italy the same as the Ottoman Empire? William IV, the Ottoman Empire was different. Between a neighboring power and a foreign power, it chose to rely on the foreign power and formed an alliance with the British Empire, intending to attack the power of the Russian Empire. In the end, it angered the neighboring power, the Russian Empire, and the two countries fought. In the end, the people in the country suffered, but the foreign power was safe. So this is an unwise geopolitical choice. Countries like Prussia are very smart, right? Italy has a good relationship with the Russian Empire, and its relationship with the British Empire is even better. The royal marriage is also peaceful with the French Empire. The hegemony is aimed at the Austrian Empire, and it finally succeeds. It is flattering on all sides and can obtain economic benefits and political support from all sides. It opened up the way to purchase iron ore in Northern Europe to accelerate its own industrial development, sell industrial products to the Russian Empire and Northern Europe, and at the same time, it does not interfere with the French Empire and lives in peace. Although it was married to Britain, it was still close to Britain to prevent British infiltration. The British Empire should not be happy, but Prussia had a good relationship with Britain. This is a smart country. I think the decision-making ability and strategic thinking of the kings and prime ministers of European countries are very important. European Times, in fact, Italy's diplomatic concern for the French Empire is not only about border issues and economic issues. The attitude of the Netherlands on the issue of Venice and the Mediterranean will also affect public opinion in Italy. Many Italians believe that the Netherlands seems to be easing relations with the Austro-Hungarian Empire at this stage, because in the previous Austro-Prussian War, the Netherlands became the active party to ease relations. Therefore, in order to ease relations with the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Netherlands will oppose Italy's claim that Venice's status belongs to Italy. In fact, it is interfering with Italy's sovereignty. How do you view this view with your life? William IV, the consistent principle of Dutch diplomacy is never to interfere in the internal policies of other European countries, right? The ownership of Venice should have nothing to do with the Netherlands. It is a conflict between Italy and Austria-Hungary. They should sit down and talk, clarify the issue and find a practical solution. We will not participate in it. Of course, if the two countries agree, the Netherlands can also make a positive move. That is, the Netherlands can push the two countries to negotiate and solve the problem. We can act as a middleman. We do want to ease the relationship with Austria-Hungary. At the same time, although we are strategic partners with Italy and the two countries even cooperate in the International Hague Court, we also respect the rights and interests of Italy and any third country. They are the parties to the problem, right? According to the Netherlands, your marriage is your business. I can make some suggestions, but whether you accept my suggestions or not is your business. However, I think it is illogical for the Netherlands to accuse Italy or Austria-Hungary. Faced with Italy's rising influence in southern Europe, the French Empire, which has always regarded southern Europe as its back garden, is actually unwilling to give up. Britain is also unwilling to give up easily. A few years ago, Italy and Spain joined the International Court of Justice in The Hague at the same time. The two countries seemed to cooperate with the Netherlands to sanction the French Empire. In fact, the moral sanctions promoted by the Netherlands were just an excuse. Who knows what they really think? Especially the marriage between Italy and Portugal. Louis I married the Princess of Emmanuel II, which made the relationship between the two countries closer. Italy's influence in southern Europe increased sharply, which threatened the status of the great power as the only hegemon in southern Europe, making Napoleon II feel that his country's security was under great threat. Faced with the potential anger of the French Empire and the intensified strategic competition between Britain and France, Italy, knowing that it could not compete with the French Empire on its own, began to turn to the British Empire. Italy was well aware that it could not effectively counter France's power and huge colonial development potential unless it cooperated with Britain. Due to the French Empire's strength advantage over Italy and other southern European countries, Victor Emmanuel II proposed a diplomatic strategy of giving priority to neighboring countries last year to further consolidate Italy's position as the second Mediterranean empire in southern Europe and create a good surrounding environment for becoming a major power in Europe and even the world. Chapter 400 Education Reform in the Netherlands. Italy intends to use the British Empire to counter the French Empire's dominance in the Mediterranean, and will inevitably invite the British Empire to enter the central Mediterranean region of southern Europe. With Britain's superstrength and rich diplomatic experience, once it further penetrates these regions, Italy's own influence will undoubtedly be further weakened. At that time, Italy's attempt to exclude the influence of the British Empire, as well as the current and foreseeable establishment and means, is nothing short of a fantasy. Italy's approach has worried many Europeans, especially those in Paris, but some people have seen an opportunity. On May 25, 1868, the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Greece, which Italy has a certain influence on, signed the Memorandum of Understanding on accelerating the three-step border negotiations. Although Italy still has a strong influence on the Kingdom of Greece, the status of the Ottoman Empire and Greece as the former sovereign and vassal states is more clear. The relationship between Greece and Austria has taken an important step under the eyes of Italy, and the two countries have reached the first step in the dispute over islands and sovereignty. Italy is located in an area with very good natural conditions. Although it is adjacent to France, it is separated by the Mediterranean Sea and borders almost 3 countries on land. France and Austria-Hungary seem to be letting it only develop on its own. The ambitious Victor Emmanuel II is mainly because Italy is not strong enough. No matter how good Victor Emmanuel II's diplomatic skills are, it seems that he cannot change the current reality that the hegemony of southern Europe is in Britain and France, which restricts Italy's development, and Italy's hegemony is declining. Political events happen in Europe every day, but for ordinary Dutch people, they just think of it as watching a story in a drama. What they care about most is their own interests. Things like the visit of King Victor Emmanuel II of Italy to Britain and France have nothing to do with them. It is better to pay attention to the news about the Dutch in America some time ago, especially the news a few days ago about the fight between the Dutch East India Company and the Rothschild financial family hidden deep in Europe. This is closely related to the vital interests of the Dutch. However, in the past few days, local newspapers in the Netherlands have reported on the country's education news, which has also attracted many people. In particular, seeing that the Minister of Education Jeremy Harman frequently appears in kindergartens, primary schools, middle schools and universities in the Netherlands, it makes people feel that the Dutch government may have new actions soon. Because the first industrial revolution in Britain brought industrial prosperity to the world, it brought a second rebirth to the Netherlands under the leadership of William IV. The old self-sufficient production model was broken, and large cross-regional companies began to rise. They organized the entire Dutch kingdom and the Far East and even the Dutch territory in Africa and America into an organic whole for the first time. The railways that run through the entire Dutch territory in the mainland and the Far East have become the arteries of this country. The Dutch people's space for activities has been greatly expanded. They are no longer satisfied with living in a small enclosed homeland. They have left to venture into big cities. City people are busy watching with their eyes wide open and listening with their ears tilted. The pace of daily urban life has begun to accelerate. School education has also changed. Countless newly invented educational methods have flooded into the streets like a tide for people to choose and discuss. It is precisely because of the improvement of material life that the Dutch people began to have more expectations for the quality of education. Therefore, many people in the Netherlands began to expect the Dutch government to respond to people's expectations and make plans to improve the basic education of the whole people. Since the Netherlands took over the Australian continent in 1863, with more abundant resources, Dutch capitalism has developed more rapidly across the country. In order to adapt to the economic and political changes, the education of the Kingdom of the Netherlands has also developed and popularized accordingly. After more than 6 years of increasing development, primary education has accelerated, secondary education has continued to grow, and higher education has moved towards a direction that is more adapted to social development. The rapid development of education in the Netherlands has a tendency to blossom everywhere. Although the popularization of education has increased significantly, most of the educational resources are concentrated in the local area. The development of secondary education in the Far East is slow, and many government officials and educators are troubled by this. At this time, Primary education has gradually become popular in the Netherlands under the mandatory requirements of William IV, and even people of color from other ethnic groups have joined this plan. This is almost the case in the territories governed by the Netherlands. This is incredible for other European countries, after all, such as Congo and Kenya in Africa. Tanzania and Madagascar are also miraculously completing primary education, although the progress is far behind the Netherlands and the Far East. But the Netherlands is still doing this, and it is clear that the Dutch approach puzzles many Europeans. At the end of 1863, the 8-year primary school system in Europe and the 6-year primary school system in the Far East became the most important school system. However, the primary school system in Dutch Africa was only 3 years, which was far from the Netherlands. The rise of preschool education at this time, a new phenomenon appeared in the education sector. The first kindergarten was established in Amsterdam in 1860. By 1867, about 8,000 kindergartens were established in 25 cities throughout the Netherlands, including the Far East. The influence of preschool children in the Netherlands increased day by day, and early childhood education became an important part of primary education. Since 1857, public secondary schools have developed rapidly and have become the main type of secondary education schools in the Netherlands. The current public schools are mainly responsible for vocational education. The curriculum is also different from the traditional curriculum, and many practical subjects have been added, which has provided a lot of talent for the development of industrialized production in the Netherlands. Since then, public secondary schools have continued to increase. In just 10 years after 1857, the number of public secondary schools in the Netherlands has increased 100 times from 50 to 1,000. The number of students enrolled has increased. Public secondary schools have trained a large number of specialized talents for the Netherlands to provide support and guarantee. The unbalanced state of education in the 3 parts of the mainland, the Far East, and Africa has also changed in the past few years. At this time, the Far East of the Netherlands is carrying out a full-scale education reform under the promotion of propagandists and members of the Education Committee. The Renaissance swept across Europe, and the education reform swept across the Far East and Africa of the Netherlands. At this time, education funding increased rapidly, and senior officials in various provinces of the Netherlands also realized that they needed to strengthen education to adapt to the rapid development of the Netherlands. The extension of the semester has increased the time students spend on education, and the content of their studies is richer and more adaptable to the development of society. However, there are still black people in society who are still neglected and oppressed, and they have few opportunities to receive education. Even so, the illiteracy rate in the Far East and Africa of the Netherlands has been greatly reduced, and the education penetration rate of the Netherlands in the Far East and Africa has been greatly improved. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.